Of course,
Gu Ning said.
she then invited them to have a seat. Please be seated. Zhou Zhenghong greeted them with great respect. It's so nice to meet you, Master Bai, Master Yan and Master Fu. The order Zhou Zhenghong greeted them was opposite of Gu Ning's, because Master Bai was the highest in rank among them. Gu Ning didn't know that. She only greeted them according to familiarity. It was beyond Zhou Zhenghong's imagination that Gu Ning knew such influential men, especially Master Bai. Nice to meet you, Mr. Zhou. Master Fu and Master Yan knew Zhou Zhenghong, but they weren't familiar with him. Although they were curious about the relationship between Gu Ning and Zhou Zhenghong, they didn't ask, since it had nothing to do with them. Zhou Zhenghong was thrilled to meet Master Yan and Master Fu. Are you really the woman we met yesterday? Master Bai looked at Gu Ning. He was too surprised to believe it. Master Bai had known it already, but wanted to make sure himself, because Gu Ning today was so different from yesterday. Yes. Otherwise I wouldn't know that you're Master Bai, Gu Ning said with a smile on her face.
You're right.
You're really great to be so able at such a young age. Master Bai complimented her plainly. Thank you so much, Gu Ning replied. Please don't blame me for coming without an invitation, Master Bai said. Of course not. It is my pleasure to have you here, Gu Ning answered. Although she didn't know Master Bai's background, she knew that he must be very influential. Girl Gu, do be careful. Master Bai is here for a purpose, Master Fu said like something bad was going to happen. Hearing that, Master Bai was irritated. Master Fu, mind your words. Don't damage my reputation. Then what are you doing here? Master Fu said with provocation in his eyes. I'm here for Girl Gu. I want to make a friend with her. You can be her friend so I can too. Master Bai argued. Gu Ning couldn't help but snort with laughter. She thought they were all lovely like adorable children, but it was time to order so she interrupted them. All right, let's order first. They all knew that Gu Ning didn't lack money, so they didn't hesitate to order their favorites. But the dishes were all simple and good for health. They weren't expensive either. Girl Gu, what do you want Master Fu to help you with? Master Yin asked. Oh, I'm going to open a jewelry company, and I need to settle the registration and some documents first. I think it'll be quicker if someone with power can help me in today's society. Thus I hope that Grandpa Fu could help me, Gu Ning said. She didn't want to hide because she needed their help too in the future. What? You're going to open a jewelry company? Both Master Yan and Master Bai were astonished and admired her as well. She planned to run a startup herself at such a young age. She was indeed ambitious and determined. However, since I'm a student now, I can't deal with everything myself. Thus I hired Uncle Zhou to help me, and I'll be the boss behind the scene, Gu Ning added. Those masters all knew Zhou Zhenghong. Although they weren't familiar with him, they had heard that he was able to do that. As for the reason why Zhoufu Jewelry suddenly had a different owner half a year ago, they also guessed correctly that it was because of Xiaoping. They didn't know the relationship between Gu Ning and Zhou Zhenghong, and they had no intention to ask, but since Gu Ning let Zhou Zhenghong be in charge of the company, she must trust him very much. This meant that they had to be close, so they didn't need to ask further. However, if they had known that Gu Ning had only Zhou Zhenghong for a short time, they would have been shocked. Not everyone could trust another person within a short time. My store will be opening soon. Please come to attend my opening ceremony. It will be of great help if you are all willing to come. Gu Ning invited them. Sure, we will, they answered without hesitation. During the meal, the atmosphere was so harmonious that others would mistake them as a family. Other than Zhou Zhenghong, who was a little nervous. Master Bai and other seniors were very influential after all. Zhou Zhenghong felt slightly uneasy in front of them. Master Fu would help them to inform the leader of the Industry and Commerce Bureau, but Zhou Zhenghong himself still needed to settle the documents. However, with Master Fu's help, it would be quick and smooth. After that, Zhou Zhenghong only needed to invite them to a meal, and send them gifts. With Master Fu's influence, Zhou Zhenghong could skip those things. However, he needed to build his network, so he still had to do those things. After the meal, everyone was ready to leave. The minute they left the restaurant, Master Yan said, "Girl Gu, please wait for a second. Let me introduce a man to you." Gu Ning felt puzzled. Meanwhile, Master Bai opened his mouth. "Oh, your son is here as well." Hearing that, Gu Ning looked over. She saw several middle-aged men talking ahead on the road, but at the same time, Gu Ning squinted suddenly with a coldness in her eyes. A red spot was moving on a middle-aged man's face among them. In the end, it stopped at the center of the man's eyebrows. Without delay, Gu Ning dashed forwards. "Hey!" Master Bai and others were surprised by Gu Ning's sudden move. What was wrong? However, before they realized what was going on, the accident happened. The middle-aged man was hit heavily by Gu Ning and fell down to one side. The next second, the bullet, which was supposed to hit the man, missed him and hit a car behind him. The sniper rifle had a silencer, so it didn't make a sound at all except for the sound when the bullet hit the car. Normally the killer would retreat once he missed the first shot, but Gu Ning still looked in the direction of the bullet in case the killer tried a second time. With her jade eyes, she was able to locate the killer accurately at once. The killer was actually ready to leave, but he was frightened by a sudden cold look. Although he couldn't see Gu Ning's face clearly, he could judge that it must be a young girl. He was surprised that the young girl was able to discover him. She was also physically strong and mentally acute with a sharp look. There was no more time for him. The killer left right away. Everyone was shocked, but when they found out the hole in the nearby car, they understood what had just happened.
Mayor.
Two men immediately went to help the middle-aged man who was knocked down by Gu Ning.
Mayor?
Gu Ning was struck dumb. This man is the mayor? Zheng Lin. Master Yan's face turned pale from fear. He almost fainted. Luckily, Zhou Zhenghong supported him. Then he quickly walked over. Yin Zhenglin felt hurt heavily all over his body. He looked embarrassed too with dust all over his clothes, but despite all of that, he calmed himself down and said, "I'm fine." Although Yin Zhenglin was still confused, he knew that it was Gu Ning who had saved his life by knocking him away. He thanked her at once. "Thank you so much. If it hadn't been for you, I would have been dead already." Before Gu Ning could say a word, Master Yin seized her hands trembling and crying. "Girl Gu, thank you so much. You've saved my son's life. Otherwise..." Oh, the mayor was Master Yan's son. He must be the person that Master Yin planned to introduce to her. "Grandpa Yin, Mayor Yin, it's no big deal. It happened too fast, so I did it without second thought. Please forgive my rude behavior," Gu Ning said. Her attitude received appreciation from others. Yin Zhenglin then knew that Master Yin must know Gu Ning. "Haha, very well. You can remain modest while staying polite. I admire you for that," Yin Zhenglin said and laughed happily. He didn't put on airs at all, even though he was an important official. "However, you've rescued my life. I'll bear your kindness in mind. This is my name card. If you have any trouble you can't deal with in the future, please feel free to call me. However, let's be candid here. If you do anything immoral or illegal, I won't help you," Yin Zhenglin said seriously. He took out a name card, handing it to Gu Ning. "Thank you so much." Gu Ning accepted the name card. "Master Yin, I think that there is no need for you to introduce them to each other. If you hadn't had Girl Gu here, probably," Master Bai said. He was still shocked by the horror. Hearing that, Yin Zhenglin figured out what was going on. His father planned to introduce him to this young girl, so that he could help her, but unexpectedly, she had saved his life. No one knew what was going to happen the next second. "Boss, are you alright?" Zhou Zhenghong asked Gu Ning worriedly. "Oh, Girl Gu, are you alright?" The rest suddenly realized they hadn't checked Gu Ning's safety yet, which was totally impolite. "I'm fine. You don't need to worry," Gu Ning answered. "Great to hear that. Master Fu and others said, finally feeling relieved. Although they were all shocked and confused about why she was able to discover the sniper, they didn't ask. After that, they said goodbye to each other. When Gu Ning and Zhou Zhenghong were gone, Yin Zhenglin looked extremely displeased. Lao Li, go and investigate what just happened. I want to know who was behind it. Yes, sir. Lao Li, the middle-aged man who stood by Yin Zhenglin in a suit, answered with respect. He was the director of the Public Security Bureau in City Ji, Li Feng. Li Feng was Yin Zhenglin's fellow. If Yin Zhenglin was in danger, he wouldn't be safe either. They didn't know who was behind it yet, but they both knew clearly what was going on. It was right at the key point of the shift of officials, and no one had goods on Yin Zhenglin. It had to be his rivals in the politics. Otherwise, it could also be Yin Zhenglin's enemies, those who had been removed by Yin Zhenglin from their offices because of their serious illegal deeds. Yin Zhenglin then made arrangement for those elderly men to leave before he went back to the government. In a restaurant near the window on the second floor, Sita Yi and Chu Xianfeng had witnessed everything. They were all astonished by Gu Ning's swift move. They knew that she was somebody, but they had no idea she was so awesome. Chu Xianfeng swallowed with great force and said in fear, Jesus, she's so unbelievable. She could even discover the sniper and save the man within such a short time. I wouldn't be able to do it myself. Chu Xianfeng now admired Gu Ning. At the same time, he was so disappointed. What should I do? I feel so ashamed now. Sita Yi remained silent, but he had to admit that Gu Ning was really excellent. All of a sudden, he had a strong interest in this girl. Who would win if they were in a game?
Gu Ning.
He would go and investigate this girl later. Meanwhile, Zhou Zhenghong was driving to the processing plant together with Gu Ning. She needed to visit the processing plant before she went back to City F. On the way, Gu Ning asked Zhou Zhenghong, Uncle Zhou, do you know Master Bai's background? Master Bai is named Bai Rushuan. He is the third richest man in City Ji with 30 billion yuan in assets. He is involved in many industries but is mainly involved in tobacco and medicine. Those two are the major industries in City Ji, Zhou Zhenghong said. Hearing that, Gu Ning was greatly surprised. She didn't know that Master Bai was so powerful. If Master Bai was going to attend her opening ceremony, it would cause a sensation. She didn't need to promote at all. Master Bai would be her live advertisement. Nevertheless, she would of course advertise. Zhou Zhenghong would deal with it. In the processing plant, Chang Qingshan and others were already in the middle of making jewelry. They used machines to process medium-high-level jade, while processing high-level jade by hand. The types of jewelry were all up to them. Gu Ning wouldn't interfere. When it was almost 3 p.m., Zhou Zhenghong drove Gu Ning to the airport. Her plane would take off at 4:30 p.m. She arrived at the airport at 3:40 p.m., and it was 4 p.m. when she got into the lounge. Gu Ning randomly sat down. It was more than 10 minutes away from the departure time. The minute she sat down, a surprised male voice sounded nearby. It is you. Hearing that, Gu Ning looked to him. He was a handsome young man, but she didn't know him. Seeing Gu Ning being puzzled, the man immediately explained, Nice to meet you. My name's Chu Xianfeng. You probably don't know me, but I know you. I saw you today at the Huangdang Hotel. Yes, the man was exactly Chu Xianfeng. To Chu Xuanfeng's surprise, he met Gu Ning in the airport. He had to go and talk to her. Was she heading to City F as well? Nice to meet you, Gu Ning replied friendly. Noticing that the man was very excited, Gu Ning knew that he must have seen her rescue the mayor. Are you going to City F? Chu Xianfeng asked. Yes, Gu Ning answered. Me too. I live in City F. How about you? Are you going to visit City F? Or do you live in there too? Chu Xianfeng asked. I live in City F too, Gu Ning said. After a short time of chatting, they went abroad. Chu Xianfeng didn't sit with Gu Ning, but they met each other again when they got off the plane. Where are you going? May I give you a lift? Chu Xianfeng asked politely. He didn't want to burden Gu Ning, so he added, My sister is here to pick me up. Thanks, but I can go back myself, Gu Ning declined. Chu Xianfeng didn't insist. They weren't familiar after all. It would be inappropriate if he insisted. When they were at the exit, both Gu Ning's and Chu Xuanfeng's sight fell on the same person at the same time. The person saw them with surprise as well. Chu Peihan, why was she here? Gu Ning was confused. Chu Peihan ran over at once. She grabbed Gu Ning's hand, asking in excitement, Boss, how come you arrived with my older brother? You older brother? Gu Ning was struck dumb for a second. She looked to Chu Xianfeng and was totally shocked. Chu Xianfeng was Chu Peihan's older brother? What a coincidence! Chu Xianfeng was also astonished. Gu Ning knew his younger sister? Wait, boss. Why did Peihan call Gu Ning boss? What was going on? Although he didn't know the details, he could guess the reason. If he guessed correctly, Chu Peihan must admire Gu Ning's outstanding ability, so she called her boss. Chu Xianfeng indeed knew his younger sister well. She was so keen on kung fu. Well, are you? Chu Peihan suddenly said meaningfully. Seeing that, Gu Ning immediately knew what Chu Peihan was thinking. She interrupted her and explained simply about how she met Chu Xianfeng. However, she didn't tell Chu Xianfeng the details about what had happened at the Huangding Hotel. She only said that she had rescued a person, and that Chu Xianfeng had accidentally seen it. They had met and chatted in the airport, and it had been a coincidence that they had met again and came out of the exit together. Fine. Actually, Chu Peihan was simply joking. Although she did hope that her older brother could have a romantic relationship with Gu Ning, she wasn't able to force them to do so. Thus she said, It's not early now. Why don't you go dine with us?
Chu Peihan sincerely invited Gu Ning.
There was no need for them to pretend. Sorry, I told my mom that I'm going home to have a meal. I can't let her down. Gu Ning declined again. All right. Chu Peihan didn't insist either. She only asked, Where do you live then? Let us give you a ride. Fenghua Luxury Mansion. This time Gu Ning didn't say no. She knew that she could be real with Chu Peihan. We're going in the same direction. Let's go. Chu Xianfeng walked ahead with Gu Ning, ignoring Chu Xianfeng completely. Chu Xianfeng felt slightly hurt. Wasn't his younger sister here for him? Wasn't she supposed to give him a hug? Wasn't she supposed to care about him? Why did she suddenly forget her older brother because of Gu Ning? Chu Xianfeng took out his phone, taking a photo of Chu Peihan and Gu Ning. He typed down lines of words, then posted it in his moments. Aren't you supposed to pick up your older brother? Why do you completely ignore your own older brother the minute you see your friend? Cry emoji. Before long, Siti saw this moment. He also immediately recognized one of the backs was Gu Ning. He squinted. Unexpectedly, Gu Ning was Chu Peihan's friend. That would make it much easier. On the way, Chu Peihan kept talking with Gu Ning. Chu Xianfeng didn't have chance to be involved at all. He wasn't happy but remained quiet. He was a gentleman and wasn't willing to interrupt them. He wanted to leave a good impression on Gu Ning too. Gu Ning said goodbye to them and got off the car when they arrived at Fenghua Luxury Mansion. After Gu Ning was gone, there were only a driver, Chu Xianfeng, and his younger sister in the car. Chu Xianfeng asked, Han, I've never seen you being so close to another person. And you even call her your boss. Ningning is so good. She can easily defeat me within 10 moves. Chu Peihan said with pure admiration and respect towards Gu Ning. Chu Xianfeng agreed. Even he admired Gu Ning's extraordinary ability, let alone Chu Peihan. He was also sure that Gu Ning must not have used her full force. Otherwise, Chu Peihan would have lost within 3 movements. Oh, why don't you have a try with Ningning someday? I'm curious to see who is going to win. I said that to Ningning the other day and she agreed, Chu Peihan said with great anticipation. She hadn't seen Gu Ning's real power, so she was really curious about Gu Ning's ability. Chu Xianfeng had seen it himself, thus he now felt cornered. In the past, he would have agreed without hesitation, but now he lost his confidence. However, he still wanted to have a try. After a few seconds of hesitation, he said, "Great." When Gu Ning finally got home, it was already 6:30 p.m. Gu Man had prepared the meal and Gu Qing's family were there too. They were waiting for her, but they all seemed displeased. Gu Ning felt that something had to be wrong. She asked with worry, "Mom, Aunt, what happened?" Gu Qing replied, "It was your eldest uncle. His proposal has been rejected by Executive Liu. Thus he called to ask whether you have done something behind his back. He even criticized us for not helping him and standing in his way." Hearing that, Gu Ning was annoyed and felt like laughing. That's insane. How can I affect Executive Li's decision? And why should I help him? I'm not as shameless as him. Exactly. Nevertheless, he now believes that it's your fault. I'm so mad at him. Gu Qing even lost her appetite for dinner. There. We did nothing wrong. Just ignore them, Gu Ning said to comfort them. Then she thought of something and said, "Oh, I've prepared jewelry made of jade for you all. The 4 of us ladies have a bracelet, a pendant and earrings, while Uncle has a wide jade ring." Gu Ning said. Then she immediately took off her backpack. She gave them the fullest jewelry to cheer them up. "Let me see. Let me have a look." Gu Qing was excited at once. "Oh, I have jewelry as well?" Jiangsu was surprised. He didn't care about jewelry, but it was from Gu Ning, so he would take it with happiness. "There is a word from our names inside the bracelets and pendants. And our Chinese zodiac signs are on the cover. You can choose your earrings according to your preference." "Uncle, yours is the same," Gu Ning said. "Wow, it's so beautiful." Gu Qing was totally thrilled. "Indeed, it's so pretty."
Gu Man beamed.
Women could never resist the allure of jewelry, especially attractive jade jewelry. Jiang Xinyue was still young, so the jewelry wasn't suitable for her yet, but she was happy to receive them as gifts. Gu Qing helped Jiang Xinyue put away her earrings and bracelet, and only left her pendant with her. After the meal, Gu Ning went back to her room. She called in Guangyao and asked him about the situation of Shanghua real estate. And Guangyao replied, "Boss, I've already told the shareholders. There are 7 shareholders except me. Only 3 of them are willing to stay, and the rest are leaving." "Great, the funds are ready. I'll be at the company tomorrow afternoon at 2. We can sign the contract," Gu Ning said. "Sure," and Guangyao answered. The next day, Gu Ning ran to school as usual. This time she didn't meet Leng Xiaoting, nor Su Jinchen. Actually, Su Jinchen and Leng Xiaoting were running in the morning as well. They saw Gu Ning but didn't appear in her sight. "Hey, why do you have to stop me since you don't want to go over and say hi yourself?" Su Jinchen planned to talk to Gu Ning, but was stopped by Leng Xiaoting. "Are you really free?" Leng Xiaoting asked. Then before Su Jinchen could say a word, he opened his mouth again. "If you're free, run another 20 kilometers. "What? I didn't say I," Su Jinchen argued. However, before he could finish, he received a cold look from Leng Xiaoting. He immediately shut his mouth. Why? How could Leng Xiaoting be so cruel? He only wanted to talk to Gu Ning. Why should he be punished for that? In addition, he only did it to test Leng Xiaoting. It seemed as if he could only gain his freedom by staying away from his boss. Gu Ning and her friends ran back to their classrooms. They met Gu Xiaoxiao on the third floor. Gu Xiaoxiao was waiting for Gu Ning. Gu Ning clearly knew why Gu Xiaoxiao was here. Seeing Gu Ning, Gu Xiaoxiao criticized her with anger. Gu Ning, did you talk to Executive Liu and tell him to reject my dad's proposal? Students around them immediately gathered. Gu Xiaoxiao, do you really believe I'm able to do that?
Gu Ning sneered.
You're merely a poor girl. You absolutely can't do that, Gu Xiaoxiao unconsciously replied. Since you don't believe I have the ability, why do you think I did it? Gu Ning asked with heavy sarcasm. Gu Xiaoxiao then realized that she made a mistake. However, even though she didn't believe that Gu Ning was able to do that, she couldn't think of anyone else who could have had done it. Before Gu Xiaoxiao could say a word, Gu Ning said, Gu Xiaoxiao, business is business. Executive Liu will only choose the best proposal for the good of his company. Your father has run a business for so many years. How can he not understand that? If your father's proposal has been rejected, it only proves your father's proposal isn't the best. Besides, if your father had been able to be the best, his assets would have been a couple 100 million yuan, instead of only a dozen million yuan. Gu Xiaoxiao was irritated by Gu Ning's words. She knew Gu Ning's words made sense, but she wasn't willing to admit it. You know I'm telling the truth. If your father doesn't understand it, his company will probably go bankrupt in the near future, Gu Ning added. Gu Ning, how dare you curse my family? Gu Xiaoxiao was in a rage. It's the reality. Face it, Gu Ning said airily. You! Gu Xiaoxiao's face turned red in anger, but she didn't know how to argue back. Also, don't blame me for everything. Just because I stay quiet doesn't mean that I'm weak. If I'm going to act, you can't afford the result, Gu Ning warned her coldly. She then said goodbye to Chu Peihan and the others, leaving for her classroom with Yu Mixi. Those onlookers all disliked Gu Xiaoxiao, which made her even angrier. Watching Gu Ning leaving, Gu Xiaoxiao wore a vicious face. Gu Ning, I won't let you get away with it. Let's go and see. In the first class, the head teacher announced the results of this monthly test. Gu Ning was the top one in the grade this time. Except for her Chinese article, which had deducted only 1 point, her other tests all gained full scores, which had never happened before. The whole classroom was very surprised. No one would believe it. What? Gu Ning is the top one in our grade? Her Chinese article only got 1 point deducted, and her other tests all have full scores? How is it possible? Isn't she always bad at studying? Xiao Feifei was the first one who expressed her doubts. Exactly. I don't believe it. She must have cheated. Wu Qingya added. Yes, I agree. The other classmates all doubted the result. All right. The head teacher stopped them. Although she couldn't believe it herself, it was the truth. She is the top one. And she is 36 points in front of the second. In addition, the teachers who were in the classroom all said that Gu Ning didn't cheat. If you have time to question others, why don't you spend more time on improving yourself? Many students were unhappy, but didn't dare to say another word. The news was also announced in other classrooms. It arose many doubts too, especially Gu Xiaoxiao, Qin Zheng and their friends. They refused to believe it. The 3 students who had always been the top 3 in their grade felt greatly displeased. Usually they were always the top 3, but the top spot was grabbed by another student who had been so bad at studying out of blue. It was so hard for them to accept the truth. Nevertheless, they could do nothing about it. Even the teacher had said that Gu Ning hadn't cheated, because she had been the first to hand the paper in every test. Muku, Chu Peihan and the others were also very surprised, but they chose to believe Gu Ning. In their eyes, Gu Ning wasn't an ordinary girl. When the class was over, they discussed fiercely in their WeChat group. How ran. Boss, you're so awesome. You're the top in our grade in this monthly test. Qin Zixuan. Exactly. How did you do it, boss? You were always the first one to hand in the paper. Chu Peihan. Though I feel surprised, I believe that it is true. Muku, me too. Zhang Tianping. Me too. Umixi. Ningming has been helping me with my studies recently. I got obviously better scores too. How ran. I don't have much interest in studying, or I'd turn to boss for help as well. Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping. Me too. Chu Peihan. It's already enough for me to go to school. I'll go crazy if I go to extra classes. Muku. Boss, could you help me with my studies? Although Muku was among the top 20, his total score was far behind Gu Ning's. Even the top two in their grade were 50 points behind Gu Ning according to their total scores, because Gu Ning's total score neared the full score. Gu Ning. No problem as long as I'm free. Gu Ning didn't think that she wasn't capable of helping a good student such as Muku. Because she had her power, it was an undeniable truth that she was better than Muku now. She would be low-key in front of outsiders, but she would be honest in front of her close friends. During the break, Gu Xiaoxiao avoided Qin Zheng, calling her cousin. She said that she had been beaten by Gu Ning, and asked her cousin to teach Gu Ning a lesson for her. Gu Xiaoxiao's cousin was Lin Yuehao, who was a son of Gu Xiaoxiao's uncle. He hated studying and fooled around all day, so he stopped studying the moment he had graduated from his high school. He was now 21, but all he knew and cared about was entertainment. However, because he fooled around all day, he knew some gangsters. Thus Gu Xiaoxiao wanted him to help her ruin Gu Ning. Gu Xiaoxiao literally hated Gu Ning to the death, and she was a malicious girl herself. It was Gu Xiaoxiao who had actively humiliated Gu Ning from the very beginning, while Gu Ning only fought back for her and her family, but Gu Xiaoxiao was too selfish and envious to realize that. Gu Xiaoxiao didn't believe that Gu Ning was able to deal with those gangsters. Lin Yuehao was of course willing to help his cousin. Lin Yuehao was arrogant himself, so he didn't think that it was a big deal at all. He promised directly that he would handle it within 2 days. The last class was the head teacher's class. Gu Ning went to ask for a leave the minute the class was over. In the past, Zhang Qiuhua would lecture Gu Ning if she asked for a leave so often, but Gu Ning had done so well in this monthly test, so Zhang Qiuhua didn't reject. Although it was still a little hard for Zhang Qiuhua to believe it, Gu Ning had promised that she hadn't cheated, and the teacher who had been in the classroom had also testified for Gu Ning. She chose to believe Gu Ning for now, but Zhang Qiuhua also reminded Gu Ning not to be proud and keep studying hard. Gu Ning left her school, but she didn't go straight to Shanghua Real Estate. She went to the commercial building. It was time for a meal and for changing her outfit. Gu Ning planned to look mature just like she had in City G. She didn't want others to recognize her. This time, Gu Ning was wearing a professional suit. She had her hair in a bun with light makeup and glasses. She looked like one of the elite. Of course, she looked like a 25-year-old woman. Gu Ning arrived at Shanghua Real Estate by a taxi before 2 p.m. Shanghua Real Estate was located on the 7th floor in a large office building. It was around 700 square meters big with over 100 employees. Shanghua Real Estate wasn't a dominating empire, so it didn't have its own office building, and there was no need for them to use a whole office building. But the 7th floor was bought by Shanghua Real Estate. It belonged to Shanghua Real Estate. Gu Ning went up to the 7th floor. She told the worker in the reception that she was here to meet in Guangyao. Then Gu Ning followed the worker to the chairman's office. The minute Gu Ning walked in the office, and Guangyao was struck dumb. Wasn't Gu Ning supposed to be here? Who was this woman? And Guangyao frowned with displeasure. He asked, "May I know your name, please?"
Unklaan Iimkuning, kuning Smilet.
What? Hearing that, and Guangyao rounded his eyes. He still couldn't believe his eyes. Gu Ning explained. I didn't want other to recognize me, so I changed. It was Gu Ning's voice. And Guang Yao then believed her. You've changed a lot. If you didn't say a word, I would never have known that it was you. Gu Ning had told Guang Yao not to tell others who the buyer of Shanghua Real Estate was before, so no one knew who the person that was going to buy Shanghua Real Estate was. However, no matter who the buyer was, Shanghua Real Estate only wanted adequate money. After a while, a lawyer who worked for Shanghua Real Estate arrived. At 1:55 p.m., 7 shareholders walked into the room continuously. When there was only 1 minute left, Guang Yao along with Gu Ning and the lawyer went inside. Since Guang Yao had already told them, Gu Ning didn't need to say it again. She only needed to sign the contract and transfer the money. It took around half an hour to finish all of this. Gu Ning was here today on behalf of the buyer. Other than Guang Yao and the lawyer, no one knew her real identity. Gu Ning got Guang Yao to collect all the shares under his name, then transfer them to her. No one would know who the person that bought Shanghua Real Estate was. Gu Ning paid 400 million yuan in total. 300 million yuan flew into the fund of Shanghua Real Estate, while the other 100 million yuan was used to buy all the shareholders' shares. In the end, Guang Yao, who had owned 55% shares, now had 20%, and Gu Ning successfully took over 70% shares under her name. They left 10% shares in the market as usual. Shenghua's stock price had declined dramatically these days, but as long as money flew in, the price would go up at once. After signing the contract, Gu Ning and Guang Yao and the lawyer went to the Industry and Commerce Bureau to transfer equities. Then, Guang Yao went back to the company. Gu Ning also left. Gu Ning let Guang Yao take full responsibility of the company, so he would deal with the following things. Those who wanted to buy Shanghua Real Estate had kept an eye on it. Thus they soon received the news that Shanghua Real Estate had already been bought. The minute the news went abroad, everybody who planned to buy Shanghua Real Estate at a low price felt disappointed. 400 million yuan actually wasn't a high price, but all of them wanted to pay a lower price than that. In the end, they had all lost the great opportunity. At the same time, some doubted that Shanghua Real Estate had been bought, and thought that Guang Yao had borrowed the money he needed, because no one knew who the buyer was and Guang Yao was still the chairman of Shanghua Real Estate. As for the shareholders who were all dismissed, everyone also believed that it was only because Guang Yao wanted to fully be in charge of the company. No one knew that Guang Yao had transferred the shares to Gu Ning. Anyway, Shanghua Real Estate stayed afloat. It wasn't 4 p.m. yet when Gu Ning left, and it was too early to go home. All of a sudden, Gu Ning thought of giving the gun back to Leng Xiaoting. She was free now and intended to invite Leng Xiaoting out, but what should they eat? Gu Ning wanted to have an expensive meal. While she was thinking about that, she went to change her clothes and remove the makeup. After that, Gu Ning had an idea. She was going to eat lobsters and crabs. Then she called Leng Xiaoting. When Leng Xiaoting received Gu Ning's call, he had just gotten back to Fenghua Luxury Mansion with Su Jinshan. He hung up Gu Ning's call and told Su Jinshan to stop the car. He then asked him to get out directly. What? Su Jinshan was struck dumb. He had no idea what Leng Xiaoting was going to do. I have something to deal with and I need the car, Leng Xiaoting said. Why do you need to be in a hurry? Can't you drive me to my home first?
Su Jinshan com lại.
Leng Xiaoting looked at ease. It didn't seem like something important was going to happen. No, it was an undeniable rejection. Su Jinshan had to get out then. Leng Xiaoting opened the door of the passenger seat, stepping outside. He passed the front of the car, sat in the driver's seat, and left directly, leaving Su Jinshan at the same place. It was Su Jinshan's car actually. Leng Xiaoting grabbed it from him. Gu Ning called Leng Xiaoting to meet in a seafood restaurant near the downtown. Gu Ning wasn't in the downtown but wasn't not far away either. It took her 40 minutes to get there by walking. The appointed time was 5 p.m. so she planned to walk there. Unexpectedly, Leng Xiaoting arrived at the restaurant at 4:30 p.m. He was half an hour early. Leng Xiaoting didn't realize that he was half an hour early until he had arrived. Since when had he become so active? Even if he wanted the gun, he had to wait till 5 p.m. Anyway, he could only wait since he was already here. Leng Xiaoting stopped the car at the parking lot outside the restaurant. And he was waiting in the car glancing at his wristwatch to check the time once in a while. It was the first time that he had felt that the time passed so slowly. Around 4:40 p.m., Gu Ning finally appeared in Leng Xiaoting's sight. Although she was 50 meters away, he recognized her in the first look. When Leng Xiaoting noticed Gu Ning, his anxiety disappeared immediately. He didn't get out of the car until Gu Ning came near. Leng Xiaoting met Gu Ning face to face like it was a coincidence. Gu Ning was stuck dumb for a second. She felt a little displeased. I didn't expect you to be here so early. I said that I'd give the gun back to you, and I will. You don't need to rush. This was the first time that someone had been unhappy because the other had arrived early for a date. Besides, Gu Ning was being slightly unreasonable now. Leng Xiaoting had arrived early, but he didn't force her to give the gun back to him right now. Well, it was mainly because Gu Ning still had a bad opinion towards Leng Xiaoting. She got displeased for no reason when she met him. Leng Xiaoting also disliked Gu Ning's words, but he didn't say anything because he was here for the gun after all. Gu Ning guided Leng Xiaoting, walking into the restaurant. They received many surprised looks. However, this time those looks weren't for her but for him. There is nothing to look at, Gu Ning said with annoyance. Leng Xiaoting frowned a little. He didn't like Gu Ning's attitude nor the attention, but he couldn't stop others from staring at him. Gu Ning asked for a private room. She ordered lobsters, crabs, fish and so forth. The two sat across from each other, but no one said a word. Gu Ning looked at Leng Xiaoting. She liked his appearance but she was unhappy that he was going to take the gun back. All of a sudden, an evil idea dawned on Gu Ning. She asked, I heard you don't like women? Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting was upset. Who told you that? He thought that it had to be Chun Meng because Chun Meng had just met Gu Ning. It wasn't the first time that Leng Xiaoting had faced that question. He had been upset but hadn't been nervous before, but now he felt nervous. Facing Gu Ning, he was nervous for no reason. Probably he didn't want her to believe it. I don't want to tell you, Gu Ning said. It's not true, Leng Xiaoting explained. No, it was not true. Although he hadn't fallen in love with any woman yet, and he hadn't thought about that question either, he was sure that he liked women, not men. Then the two fell into silence again. Before long, the dishes were on the table. Without hesitation, Gu Ning started to enjoying the meal, while Leng Xiaoting sat still. Why aren't you eating? Gu Ning asked. Actually, she didn't care whether he ate or not, but he kept looking at her. It was strange. I'm not hungry, Leng Xiaoting said. Well, am I too beautiful that you prefer to look at me instead of eating?
Gu Ning jokket.
Hearing that, Leng Xiaoting was struck dumb for a second. He then realized that he had been absent-minded staring at Gu Ning. He panicked a little but retorted, Of course not. Gu Ning couldn't help but roll her eyes. She wasn't blind to miss that detail. However, Gu Ning didn't think that Leng Xiaoting had special feelings towards her, because she couldn't see any fondness in his eyes. Actually, Leng Xiaoting hadn't figured out what fondness was yet. He only felt that Gu Ning was pleasant to get along with, even though she didn't seem elegant while she was eating. After Gu Ning's reminder, Leng Xiaoting stopped staring at her. Gu Ning continued to eating without feeling uneasy. Although Gu Ning ate a lot, she still wasn't able to finish all the dishes. She had ordered for two, but Leng Xiaoting didn't eat at all. Thus half of the dishes were left on the table. Leng Xiaoting would be paying the bill after all, so Gu Ning didn't need to worry about that. After the meal, Gu Ning took out the gun, handing it to Leng Xiaoting. It's yours now. Don't follow me anymore. Lung Xiaoting looked at the gun, but he didn't take it back at once. Instead, he felt a little disappointed when Guning told him not to follow her anymore. Suddenly, he was reluctant to take the gun back. What was happening to him? Do you want it or not? If you don't take it, I'll regret now. Seeing that Lung Xiaoting stayed still, Guning lost her patience. She didn't know what was on his mind. He was the one who urged her to give the gun back to him, but now he wouldn't take it himself. Do you really like this gun? Lung Xiaoting asked. Yeah, will you give it to me because I like it? Guning asked, but she didn't believe it. If he would give it to her because she liked it, he wouldn't spend so much effort on chasing it back. Nevertheless, why did he ask the question? Thinking about how Chun Meng hadn't defeated Guning, Lung Xiaoting blurted it out. I'll give you a chance. If you can persist for at least 10 minutes in a fight with me, I'll give it to you. Lung Xiaoting didn't realize what he had just said until he said it. However, he didn't regret it. Somehow, he believed that Guning wouldn't do any illegal things with the gun. Most importantly, he wasn't willing to see her being unhappy. What? Hearing that, Guning felt puzzled instead of happy. To persist for at least 10 minutes in a fight with him and he would give the gun to her? However, he was the one who had said that it was illegal to hold a gun secretly as an ordinary citizen. Now he promised to give her a chance. What was wrong with him? Besides, Guning knew that Lung Xiaoting was better than Chun Meng. She wasn't confident in being able to defeat him. All of a sudden, even Guning, who had an agile mind, failed to understand. Lung Xiaoting was dissatisfied to see Guning's reaction. Didn't she want this gun badly? Noticing Lung Xiaoting's face, Guning immediately got her mind back. No matter what Lung Xiaoting meant, she certainly wanted the gun. She answered without hesitation. No problem. Where should we have the fight? Lung Xiaoting was relieved to receive an affirmative answer. He said, Fenghua Luxury Mansion, the gym in C-Zone. Then Guning followed Lung Xiaoting to leave for Fenghua Luxury Mansion. They parked the car in the underground parking lot before heading to the gym in C-Zone. Su Jinshan had a card in this gym and Lung Xiaoting and Su Jinshan had come here several times these days. Thus the boss knew them and agreed to lend Lung Xiaoting the place for 10 minutes. It was the dinner time, so there weren't many people inside. Several men who were working out stopped to watch at once when they heard that Lung Xiaoting was going to have a fight with Guning. A tall, strong man versus a slim young teenager. No one believed that Guning could win, but they also knew that they were competing for fun. The two were ready and the game began. In the beginning, Guning didn't use her full force, while Lung Xiaoting apparently didn't want to hurt her. Therefore, it was even. Those onlookers were all surprised to see Guning wasn't weak at all. Appearance did lie. As the time went by, both of them started to hit heavily, but obviously, Guning couldn't beat Lung Xiaoting. No matter how hard she hit, Lung Xiaoting was always able to do better than her. Guning actually had no ambition to defeat Lung Xiaoting. She only hoped that she could still stand after 10 minutes. Thus, whenever she felt that she was out of strength, she used her power to enhance her ability. Therefore, it was also difficult for Lung Xiaoting to beat her down. Accordingly, Lung Xiaoting was astonished. Guning was even better than he had believed. Lung Xiaoting didn't want to defeat Guning. He didn't use his full force either. He only controlled Guning secretly and prevented her from winning. Guning wasn't dumb. She knew what Lung Xiaoting was doing, but she was confused by why he would do that. She couldn't help thinking that Lung Xiaoting liked her, so he pretended to be weak. 10 minutes passed quickly. Guning didn't lose, so the gun was hers now. A round of applause sounded. Everyone looked at Lung Xiaoting and Guning with admiration. They didn't know that Lung Xiaoting had pretended to be weak and allowed Guning to take advantage of it. They had enjoyed the fight. It was like a Hollywood action movie, and they had fought against each other face to face, while those movies all relied on special effects. Why did you pretend to be weak? Guning walked to Lung Xiaoting and asked him. Lung Xiaoting panicked a little. He didn't answer her question but warned, "If I ever find out that you used the gun to hurt innocent people, I'll get you myself." After that, Lung Xiaoting ignored Gu Ning, stepping away directly. Gu Ning was aware that he panicked. Did he really like her? Gu Ning wasn't sure, but if it was really that, she wouldn't reject. She thought it was funny instead. Maybe because she appreciated his handsome appearance, or because she had good opinions towards military officers. In Gu Ning's eyes, Lung Xiaoting almost escaped away. Indeed, Lung Xiaoting left so fast because he panicked. Gu Ning didn't go back home but instead went to school. She had only asked for a leave for this afternoon. When she got to school, it was 10 minutes away from the evening class. Gu Ning went straight to the head teacher's office. She planned to propose not attending the evening class from now on. In the beginning, the head teacher disagreed. It wouldn't be good for Gu Ning's study, but Gu Ning promised that she would keep on studying hard. So the head teacher agreed in the end. The head teacher also said that if she failed to be one of the top 10 after the next test, she had to attend the evening class then. Gu Ning agreed willingly. She now didn't worry about her studies at all. From afar, Gu Ning saw an E walking around the door of her classroom. She knew that he must be here for her. An E must want to thank her for rescuing him. He didn't know about the deal between Gu Ning and his dad yet. The minute An E saw Gu Ning, he wore a pleased face. "E? Guam Ning. How are you?" Gu Ning asked. "I'm fine now. I wanted to thank you for what you've done for me. But you were absent this afternoon. Would you please come to lunch with me tomorrow? I really want to thank you all. Please." Although An E mainly wanted to thank Gu Ning and her friends, he also wanted to express his affection towards Gu Ning. "Sure."
Gu Ning sighed.
Gu Ning and An Guangyao were close now. She wouldn't reject An E for the sake of his father. An E was thrilled to have Gu Ning's affirmative answer. "Great, then I'll come to you tomorrow noon." Then they said goodbye to each other. Most of the classmates inside saw Gu Ning talking with An E. They also knew that An E was chasing Gu Ning, so they thought that it was understandable, but Xiao Feifei and her friends were envious of Gu Ning. They couldn't accept the fact that Gu Ning, who had been poor and disliked by many, was now so popular. They actually didn't know An Yi's background. If they had known that An E was from a rich family, they would have hated Gu Ning to the death. Nonetheless, An Yi's family business was different now, because the company that once belonged to his family was now Gu Ning's property. Luckily, An E remained low profile, and not many people knew about his background. Besides, his family business almost went bankrupt this time. He also knew that someone had bought the company, but he had no idea who the buyer was. Therefore, An E didn't believe that he was still a rich kid. Gu Ning went into the classroom. She told Mixi and other friends in the WeChat group that she wouldn't be attending the evening class from now on. Chu Peihan, Hao Ran, Qin Zixuan and Zhang Tianping went to school every day only because of Gu Ning. Since Gu Ning wouldn't be attending the evening class, they would do the same thing. Mu Ku and Mixi would follow the rules as usual. They planned to train in the afternoon in the future. As for the reason why Gu Ning wouldn't be attending the evening class, she simply explained that she didn't want to. Since she was the top one in their grade, now no one could blame her for being so casual. When Gu Ning got home in the evening, she also told her mom about her scores in this monthly test and her decision. Gu Man was happy to hear about it. Parents all wanted their children to be excellent and outstanding. Although Gu Man had never criticized or blamed Gu Ning for her bad performance in school, she was thrilled to see that her daughter had improved a lot. Gu Man supported Gu Ning not attending the evening class as well. She now completely believed in her daughter. When Gu Xiaoxiao got home, she told Gu Qinxiang and others about what had happened that morning. Gu Qinxiang was in a rage. He had to admit that Gu Ning's words made sense, but he hated Gu Ning for saying it in public. It was humiliating in his eyes. Gu Qingxiang ignored the fact that it was Gu Xiaoxiao who had gone to argue with Gu Ning first. Selfish people only cared about their feelings and treated others badly. Gu Qingxiang's entire family started to swear at Gu Ning. If it hadn't been for Gu Man not being willing to answer their calls, they would have called and sworn at them directly. They also didn't know Gu Ning's number. In fact, they hadn't supported Gu Ning for a single day, so they actually weren't in the position to slam Gu Ning. Gu Xiaoxiao didn't mention that Gu Ning was the top one in their grade in this monthly test. She had always been the best student in the Gu family, and she didn't want to be replaced. Even though Gu Ning had cut her connection with the Gu family, her family name was still Gu after all. The next day, Gu Ning left Zhongji and met Su Jinshan. Hey, morning.
Chu Yinchan kreetet Gu Ning.
Good morning.
Gu Ning sait.
Are you going to school? Oh, I do miss my school days, Su Jinshan said when he noticed that Gu Ning was in her school uniform with a backpack. I wish that I could get rid of my school days as soon as possible. I want my freedom, Gu Ning said.
Ah, I understand.
It is boring staying in the school all day, but once you need to find a job and earn money, you'll be stressed and miss your school days, Su Jinshan said. It was true. Most people started to miss their school days once they left school and tried making a living in society. Those who had a rich or powerful family would feel that it was easy, but those who didn't would be under great pressure. I agree. So even though I don't like studying, I will seize my chance to enjoy my school life. I don't want to regret it in the future, Gu Ning said. She disliked studying. It was time-consuming, but since she had been reborn, she wanted to live an ordinary life. She couldn't let the hatred get the best of her. She would get revenge and also enjoy her life. Gu Ning didn't talk with Su Jinshan for very long, because she had to go to school. After Gu Ning was gone, Leng Xiaoting appeared from other side. He glanced at Su Jinshan but didn't say a word. Su Jinshan felt nervous at once. Why didn't Leng Xiaoting stop him from chatting with Gu Ning? Su Jinshan thought for a while, then asked Leng Xiaoting. Xiaoting, what do you think of Gu Ning? What? Leng Xiaoting said. Do you think that she would be a good girlfriend? Su Jinshan asked again. I don't know, Leng Xiaoting replied. He had no idea because he didn't understand romantic relationships at all. Oh, Su Jinshan cleared his throat, then asked seriously, Xiaoting, be honest with me. What is your relationship with her? Nothing, Leng Xiaoting said. Really? Don't lie to my face. I'm getting interested in Gu Ning now. If there is nothing between you two, I'm going to chase her, Su Jinshan said with sincerity. Leng Xiaoting stayed expressionless, but he felt displeased in his heart. He said unconsciously, You don't match. Why? No matter whether she is from a rich family or a powerful family, her family is hardly comparable with mine. Also, you know my family doesn't care about background as long as I like her. Gu Ning is beautiful. I'm good-looking too. I'm also upright with a good job, Su Jinshan argued. Why didn't they match? Actually, Leng Xiaoting didn't know why himself. He just wanted Su Jinshan to stay away from Gu Ning. Go with me to fulfill the task tomorrow, Leng Xiaoting ordered. Then he left directly. What? Su Jinshan was shocked. No way. He still had 5 days off during this vacation, but he had to leave tomorrow? Boss, I haven't finished my vacation yet. You can't do that to me, Su Jinshan complained, catching up to Leng Xiaoting, but Leng Xiaoting ignored him. Boss! Su Jinshan almost cried. He didn't understand why Leng Xiaoting suddenly treated him so badly. Was it only because he wanted to chase Gu Ning? Leng Xiaoting had said that there was nothing between him and Gu Ning. So why wouldn't he allow Su Jinshan to chase her? When Gu Ning got near her school, several men dashed from out of a nearby van all of a sudden. They stood in Gu Ning's way. Gu Ning's face changed immediately. How dared they stop her in the school? Students around them all ran away. They knew that something bad was about to happen. Those men looked like hoodlums who did bad things without thinking of the results. Someone took out a phone to record. No one knew if he was having fun or wanted to save it as proof and then hand it to the police. Those men surrounded Gu Ning, planning to pull Gu Ning into the car. School wasn't where they could hurt a student randomly. However, just as they approached Gu Ning, she began to hit them. She broke a man's nose with a fist. The man screamed in pain with blood around his nose. Before he could fight back, Gu Ning grabbed his hand. She lifted him, throwing him at another man. The second man was knocked down on the ground. Both of them felt greatly hurt, screaming in pain like pigs. Meanwhile, the third man secretly attacked Gu Ning from the back. But Gu Ning successfully escaped his attack just as the third man almost touched her. Then she raised her knee, hitting the man directly in his stomach. The third man immediately covered his stomach with his hands. Gu Ning kicked him down to the floor without hesitation. There were two men still standing. It had happened too fast, so they didn't have time to retreat. Gu Ning threw her backpack into the air, dashing to one of them and hit him in the face. As for the last man, Gu Ning caught his hand and snapped it easily. The man was in severe pain, screaming loudly. The onlookers were all shocked by the scene. Someone recognized Gu Ning, and the student who was recording immediately uploaded the video to the forum with the title "Goddess Gu showed her extraordinary power again." 1 vs 5. Who sent you here? Gu Ning asked angrily. No one, the man answered. Really? Gu Ning apparently didn't believe it. She pressed the man's hand with more force. The man almost cried. The others didn't dare to come up and stop her, but they did threaten her. One of them said, "Let him go. We're from the Qing gang. If you dare to have bad blood with us, you'll be unable to bear the consequences of failure."
King Gong.
Gu Ning frowned slightly.
King Gang again.
Was it Li Zhenjin? However, Li Zhenjin was in City G now. She probably wouldn't be able to hurt Gu Ning in City F. Then who would behind this? Gu Xiaoxiao, Chen Xiao, Xiao Feifei, or Qin Zheng? Except for those names, Gu Ning couldn't think of any others. At the same time, those students all drew in a deep breath when they heard that those hoodlums were from the Qing gang. So what? The Qing gang can randomly kidnap people.
Gu Ning sneered.
She didn't seem scared at all. She was too annoyed to be afraid now. Everyone was surprised that Gu Ning wasn't afraid of the Qing gang. You! Those hoodlums suddenly didn't know what to say. Meanwhile, someone uploaded more videos titled, "A female student beats down 5 men from the Qing gang." Gu Ning added, "I'll give you one chance. You either tell me who is behind this, or I'll call the police." Hearing that, those hoodlums looked terrified. Although they were from the Qing gang, they weren't important at all. Their boss had also warned them. If they dared to cause any trouble, the Qing gang wouldn't help them. Of course, if they stayed quiet, they would be safe. During these years, they had done many bad things. However, they also knew who they could bully and who they should stay away from. Lin Yuehao had told them that this female student was merely a poor kid, and they would be fine. However, now it seemed totally different. Those hoodlums didn't think that Lin Yuehao had lied to them, because once they were in trouble, Lin Yuehao couldn't get away with it either. If Gu Ning called the police, they could end up in jail. It was impossible for them to run away now. Therefore, they were about to tell Gu Ning who was behind this. Right at that moment, there was a noise in the van. Gu Ning immediately kicked the man in her hand away. She then went to the van and opened its door. In the car, Lin Yuehao was nervous that those hoodlums would tell Gu Ning that he was behind this, but he accidentally made some noise and was discovered by Gu Ning. When Gu Ning saw Lin Yuehao, she knew who was behind this without asking. She had only met Lin Yuehao several times, but she had never had an argument with him. He must have done this for Gu Xiaoxiao. Those hoodlums were actually going to betray Lin Yuehao, so seeing that he exposed himself, they were all relieved. They were close after all. It was difficult for them to betray him, but if they had to choose between themselves and Lin Yuehao, they definitely would choose themselves. It's not me. It's Gu Xiaoxiao who asked me to do this. Please forgive me and punish her. Lin Yuehao was a hoodlum, but he was also a coward. He would yield to those with power. He even betrayed his cousin. Gu Ning had shocked all of them, and no one dared to irritate her now. At the same time, there was another post that appeared in their school forum titled, "The man alleges that Gu Xiaoxiao is behind this." Gu Ning took out her phone to record. With the camera aimed at Lin Yuehao, she asked coldly, "Say it again. Who asked you to hurt me? Why did she do that? And what did she ask you to do to me?" Facing Gu Ning's phone, Lin Yuehao hesitated. He knew that once Gu Ning recorded what he said, he couldn't deny it anymore. It would ruin his relationship with Gu Xiaoxiao. But Lin Yuehao felt threatened and terrified under the pressure from Gu Ning. He had to say it out. "It's Gu Xiaoxiao. She called me and said that you'd beaten her. She wanted us to rape you." To rape her? Hearing that, everyone was shocked. Gu Xiaoxiao was so malicious. Although the times were different now and no one would criticize a girl who had sex before she got married, but rape was evil. If a girl was raped by strangers, her life would be ruined. No one could bear the result. Gu Ning let them go in the end, not because she forgave them, but because she couldn't beat them to death after all. If they were dead under her hands, she had to take the responsibility. If she called the police, they would probably be in jail for several days at the most. She would also be punished for fighting. Thus she ended it for now. As for Gu Xiaoxiao, Gu Ning would let her pay for it. Gu Ning uploaded the video to the forum. Within several minutes, the video went viral on the internet. After watching the videos, everyone was astonished. "Wow, my almighty goddess Gu. She beat down 5 men outside our school within minutes." Where? On the school forum. Jesus, she is so awesome. Gu Xiaoxiao also noticed that her scheme went public. When she found out that Gu Ning could easily beat those hoodlums down, she was extremely upset. Meanwhile, she was nervous that she would be exposed. Qin Zheng frowned tightly with mixed emotions. He didn't know whether he felt disappointed to see that Gu Ning was safe, or whether he was concerned about her safety. Of course, he had no idea that Gu Xiaoxiao was behind this. He only felt confused about whom Gu Ning had bad blood with. Who is behind this? 5 hoodlums attacked Gu Ning at the same time. Zhang Yiming asked, puzzled. Who knows? Unfortunately, she has survived. I dislike her being so proud, Fu Mingliang said. Wow, she is so confident. She isn't even afraid of the Qing gang. Exactly. I admire her. I think she is being arrogant. I don't believe that she can beat the Qing gang. She's doomed. It was the Qing gang. Qing gang was one of the 2 largest gangs in this country. No one dared to annoy them. Let alone ordinary people, even powerful officials weren't willing to mess with them. But when everyone watched the video about Gu Xiaoxiao, they rounded their eyes again. All the classmates looked to Gu Xiaoxiao with one accord in amazement, while Gu Xiaoxiao's face turned pale. Her hands trembled, and her phone fell on the desk. Xiaoxiao. Qin Zheng opened his mouth but failed to ask the question. It was so astonishing and unacceptable. Even though there were many people with the same name, there was only one Gu Xiaoxiao in their school who had bad blood with Gu Ning. It wasn't difficult for Qin Zheng to believe it. Besides, Gu Xiaoxiao was in a panic. It was the first time Qin Zheng had found that Gu Xiaoxiao was so strange, So evil and so vicious. He couldn't help but think that if he hurt her someday in the future, would she punish him the same way? Gu Xiaoxiao was bad-tempered in daily life. She loved to bully Gu Ning, but she mostly humiliated her by words only. However, Qin Zheng admitted that he wasn't a good person himself, but he never thought about hiring hoodlums to ruin someone for him. Both Zhang Yiming and Fu Mingliang also felt that Gu Xiaoxiao was so strange and so evil now. No, it's not me. Not me. It's slander. Gu Xiaoxiao immediately retorted. She couldn't admit it. Once she admitted it, her reputation would be ruined. Although she denied it, her face and reaction betrayed her. But just as she finished, a voice sounded. Say it again. Who asked you to hurt me? Why did she do that? And what did she ask you to do to me? It was a female voice. They all knew that it was Gu Ning. Then it was a man's voice. I. After a few seconds, the man continued. It's Gu Xiaoxiao. She called me and said that you'd beaten her. She wanted us to rape you. Hearing that, everyone took a long breath in. They looked at Gu Xiaoxiao in horror. To everyone's surprise, Gu Xiaoxiao was such an evil person. Qin Zheng knew that Lin Yuehao was Gu Xiaoxiao's cousin. The minute he heard his voice, he knew that it must have been Lin Yuehao. He then watched the video. He was right. No, it's not me. Not me. It's slander. Gu Xiaoxiao refused to admit it. Others probably had doubts, but Qin Zheng knew clearly that Gu Xiaoxiao's cousin had betrayed her, which made it more reliable. Besides, Gu Xiaoxiao appeared panicked. No one could ignore it, and most of them started to believe that Gu Xiaoxiao was behind all of this. At the same time, Xiao Feifei and Chen Xiao also heard the news. Although they were disappointed that Gu Ning hadn't been hurt at all, they were happy to see that Gu Ning had bad blood with the Qin gang. Chen Xiao understood that Gu Ning wouldn't let Gu Xiaoxiao get away with it, so she didn't dare to stay with Gu Xiaoxiao now. Chu Peihan, Mu Ku and others went back to their classrooms after they finished training. On the way, Hao Ran took out his phone, noticing the videos going viral on the internet. What the F***CK? How dare that Gu Xiaoxiao turn to the Qin gang for help to hurt our boss? What? Gu Xiaoxiao turned to the Qin gang for help to hurt our boss. Hearing that, they were all surprised. They immediately gathered around Hao Ran and watched the videos. No one was pleased to see those videos. Some felt annoyed about what Gu Xiaoxiao had done to Gu Ning, while some was terrified of the Qin gang. Except for Chu Peihan. She was more than annoyed now. Although the Qin gang was powerful, it wouldn't allow its members to do such immoral things. But some of those shameless hoodlums still did it secretly. And their aim was Gu Ning, which was totally unacceptable in Chu Peihan's eyes. Chu Peihan resent those videos to her older brother at once, and let him deal with it. Chu Xianfeng was an important figure besides Sitiyi. He was the leader of the Zhuke group, which was the information center of the Qin gang. Even though they were all mad, they were also astonished and excited to see that Gu Ning beat those men down easily. They all had the same idea in mind. Let's stand up for our boss. Hao Ran said. Sure. Others agreed. Before long, they went straight to the teaching building. They didn't doubt whether Gu Xiaoxiao was innocent or not, because it was so obvious that Gu Ning had sent out the video, in which Lin Yuehao betrayed Gu Xiaoxiao. If it wasn't true, Gu Ning would not do that. They trusted Gu Ning. Knowing that Gu Ning was fine, they didn't go to find her. All the students were scared of them and stepped aside when they walked by. Mixie, if you don't want to be involved in trouble, you can go back to your classroom. We won't blame you, Hao Ran said to Yu Mixie on the way. They all understood that Yu Mixie was different from them. They weren't afraid to cause trouble, but Yu Mixie was always a good, quiet student. They didn't want her to get in trouble too. Indeed, Mixie, don't feel you have to do this, Muku added. No, I'll go with you all. Although Yu Mixie was truly worried about getting in trouble, she made up her mind to stand with her friends. Gu Ning treated her so well. She couldn't be so selfish at this moment. Even though she probably wouldn't be very helpful, She wanted to show where she stood. Hao Ran and the others didn't insist. Chu Xianfeng soon discovered the videos sent by Chu Peihan. He had witnessed Gu Ning defeat 4 grown-up men, so he wasn't very surprised to find out that she had beaten down those 5 hoodlums, but he was also irritated that someone went to rape Gu Ning for a bit of money. Luckily they had failed. They had failed only because Gu Ning wasn't weak. If Gu Ning had been a weak girl, she probably would have been ruined already. Chu Xianfeng had good feelings towards Gu Ning. His younger sister and Gu Ning were close friends as well. Chu Peihan was willing to send those videos to him and let him deal with it. It proved that Gu Ning meant a lot to Chu Peihan. Therefore, Chu Xianfeng had to handle it well. Of course, even if not for Gu Ning, Chu Xianfeng wouldn't allow his people to damage the Qin gang's reputation either. Such immoral deeds would hugely damage the Qin gang's reputation, so Chu Xianfeng couldn't ignore it. Without delay, Chu Xianfeng asked his men to investigate. He wanted to know whether those hoodlums were from the Qin gang and who their direct boss was. There were so many people in the Qin gang that Chu Xianfeng didn't know every one of them. He was only familiar with the management and those key figures. If they weren't from the Qin gang and only used the Qin gang's influence to do bad things, he could punish them gently. However, if they were from the Qin gang, they disobeyed the rules and would be punished severely according to the principles of the Qin gang. Chu Xianfeng knew that it wasn't convenient for Chu Peihan to receive calls, since she sent those videos to him through WeChat. Thus he didn't call her. In the first classroom, everyone was stunned when Chu Peihan, Hao Ran and others suddenly dashed inside. Those who recognized them knew that they must be here to cause Gu Xiaoxiao trouble. And those who didn't know their relationship with Gu Ning also understood that something terrible was going to happen, but they had no sympathy for Gu Xiaoxiao. Some even gloated, especially the girls. Qin Zheng had many admirers, but his girlfriend was Gu Xiaoxiao. Many girls hated Gu Xiaoxiao because of that. Seeing that Gu Xiaoxiao was in trouble now, they couldn't help but gloat. Besides, what Gu Xiaoxiao had done was literally unacceptable. Gu Xiaoxiao knew that they were here for her. She was scared. Except for Zhang Tianping and Yu Mixi, she didn't dare to have bad blood with any of the rest. She was trembling in terror and was eager to escape back to her home, but she couldn't. Chu Peihan was the first one who ran to Gu Xiaoxiao, slapping her across her face loudly. Everyone was shocked. Gu Xiaoxiao was in great pain and annoyed. Although Gu Xiaoxiao was afraid of Chu Peihan, she didn't want to tolerate that. She snapped at Chu Peihan. Chu Peihan, why did you hit me? Gu Xiaoxiao's aim was Gu Ning, not Chu Peihan. Even though Chu Peihan and Gu Ning were close, she couldn't slap Gu Xiaoxiao for that. Gu Xiaoxiao was mad about it. Chu Peihan indeed wasn't Gu Xiaoxiao's aim, but she chose to stand up for Gu Ning. She did it on purpose. Meanwhile, Qin Zheng, who was Gu Xiaoxiao's boyfriend, stayed quiet. He felt greatly disappointed by Gu Xiaoxiao, and he was also terrified of Chu Peihan and her friends. If Chu Peihan was here alone, he probably would say something, but Hao Ran and his brothers were here too. If he helped Gu Xiaoxiao, he would be involved. Qin Zheng didn't want to be beaten by them. Because you deserve it, Gu Xiaoxiao. How dare you hurt Gu Ning like that? Chu Peihan raised her voice in anger. Hao Ran and other boys stood still, because Chu Peihan alone could handle the situation. Besides, they didn't want to hit a girl. I didn't. Gu Xiaoxiao denied, even though no one believed her. She was so stupid to think that as long as she denied, she would be safe. You didn't? We weren't born yesterday. Chu Peihan grabbed Gu Xiaoxiao's hair, sneering. Let me go. Gu Xiaoxiao struggled in pain, but the harder she struggled, the greater the pain she was in. Her tears poured out. No way. After that, Chu Peihan slapped her once more with a loud sound. Several slaps followed. Gu Xiaoxiao's cheeks swelled. She cried because of the pain. Gu Xiaoxiao tried to struggle but failed. In front of Chu Peihan, who had been practicing kung fu since she had been a young girl, Gu Xiaoxiao could only suffer. Qin Zheng felt disappointed in Gu Xiaoxiao, but he also didn't want to see her suffering. He opened his mouth. Chu Peihan, enough? Chu Peihan stopped, but not because of Qin Zheng. She thought it was time to stop for a while, but her hand was still grabbing Gu Xiaoxiao's hair. Because Qin Zheng opened his mouth to stop Chu Peihan, Hao Ran and the boys were annoyed. Chu Peihan shouted at Qin Zheng. Qin Zheng, do you F** King want to be beaten too? If Gu Ning had been a weak girl, she would have been ruined already. After that, she could have committed suicide too. If so, Gu Xiaoxiao would be the killer. Qin Zheng was stunned. Indeed, if something bad had ever happened to Gu Ning, Gu Xiaoxiao would have been the killer. She could have ended up in jail too. If Gu Ning had been the same weak girl that she had been before, she would have committed suicide. Qin Zheng, if Gu Xiaoxiao had done such an immoral thing to your friends, or your families, would you let her go? Muka said. Don't think that because they have failed Gu Xiaoxiao can get away with it. If Gu Ning calls the police, Gu Xiaoxiao could end up in jail for years, Hao Ran said. Hearing that, Gu Xiaoxiao's body shook in horror all of a sudden. No, she didn't want to go to jail. No, it was not me. Not me. Once Gu Xiaoxiao opened her mouth, her swollen cheeks pulled. She was in great pain, but insisted that she didn't do it.
Jesus shupensneret.
Gu Xiaoxiao was so shameless to deny the fact. The bell rang and it was time for the class, but Chu Peihan and other didn't have time to retreat yet. Wang Qingqi, who was the head teacher of the first classroom, walked in. He saw what was happening right before his eyes. Wang Qingqi recognized Hao Ran and the others the minute he saw them. He knew that something must be wrong. After all, Hao Ran and the boys were notorious for causing trouble all day. What are you doing here? Wang Qingqi criticized them. Hearing Wang Qingqi's voice, all the students in the room sat back in their seats at once, except for Hao Ran and his friends. They glanced at Wang Qingqi airily. Before hearing the answer, Wang Qingqi noticed that Chu Peihan was grabbing Gu Xiaoxiao's hair. The latter's cheeks were red and swollen. Gu Xiaoxiao was weeping and could barely speak a word. Wang Qingqi was upset. Chu Peihan, let her go. Why did you beat her? Chu Peihan loosened her hand, staring at Wang Qingqi. She sneered. Because she deserves it. Please don't rush to blame me. You should check the hottest news on our school forum first. Hearing that, Wang Qingqi knew that it was complicated. He immediately pulled out his phone, checking the school forum. He read through the posts and videos. He was shocked by Gu Ning's extraordinary ability, then was mad at Gu Xiaoxiao's involvement. Although he wasn't sure that Gu Xiaoxiao was behind all of this, he wasn't able to deny it either. However, before solid proof was on the table, he tried his best to curb his anger. He questioned Gu Xiaoxiao. Gu Xiaoxiao, is it true? If so, Gu Xiaoxiao would be too vicious. What had Gu Ning done to Gu Xiaoxiao that made her be so cruel to Gu Ning? No, it's not true, Gu Xiaoxiao insisted. But she wasn't skillful enough to hide her real feelings. She panicked so obviously. Wang Qingqi was annoyed as well as disappointed. He had great anticipation for each one of his students in the first classroom. He felt hurt now. What Gu Xiaoxiao had done went overboard. It was too influential to ignore. Even though he wanted to help Gu Xiaoxiao, his hands were tied. Not only Gu Ning, but also the other students in their school were waiting for an explanation. Their school's reputation could also be affected if that thing couldn't be handled properly. Chu Peihan, Gu Xiaoxiao, you two follow me to the academic affairs office. He as an ordinary teacher couldn't handle it himself. He could only bring them to the academic affairs office and hand them over to the leader of the academic affairs office. Although it was Gu Xiaoxiao's fault, Chu Peihan was also wrong to beat her. They both needed to go to the academic affairs office. As for Hao Ran and others, they hadn't done anything, so they wouldn't be punished. You all go back to your classrooms now, he said. Hao Ran and others unconsciously glanced at Chu Peihan with worry.
Chu Peihan stay calm.
She gave them a knowing glance. She was used to visiting the academic affairs office and couldn't care less about it. Once Hao Ran and others understood that Chu Peihan would be fine, they went back to their classrooms. Gu Xiaoxiao was reluctant to go to the academic affairs office, but she had to. Gu Xiaoxiao is injured. Please take her to the infirmary first, someone said. Hearing that, Wang Qingqi then realized he should take Chu Peihan and Gu Xiaoxiao to the infirmary firstly. When they had just left the teaching building, they met Gu Ning by accident. Gu Ning was surprised to see Chu Peihan and Gu Xiaoxiao, who had red, swollen cheeks, but she soon figured out what had happened. She had no sympathy for Gu Xiaoxiao. She only felt touched because Chu Peihan had done that for her. Gu Ning was slightly concerned that Chu Peihan would be in trouble, and they had been caught by the head teacher right on time. It seemed that Chu Peihan understood what was on Gu Ning's mind. She rolled her eyes like she didn't care about it at all. When Gu Xiaoxiao met Gu Ning, there was still unkindness in her eyes. Chu Peihan glared at her and Gu Xiaoxiao immediately lowered her head. Wang Qingqi was the head teacher of the first classroom. He had also taught Chinese in other classrooms for 2 years. He remembered every student in his classes, including Gu Ning. When he saw Gu Ning, he had mixed emotions. Gu Ning was the victim, but he still didn't know what Gu Ning had done to Gu Xiaoxiao that made her be so cruel to Gu Ning. He wasn't willing to jump to the conclusion that Gu Ning was innocent, while Gu Xiaoxiao was vicious. No one would commit a crime out of the blue. Gu Ning, follow us to the academic affairs office, Wang Qingqi said. Sure. Gu Ning answered without hesitation. On the way, Chu Peihan and Gu Ning kept contacting each other with their eyes. Since Wang Qingqi was here, they couldn't talk. Wang Qingqi called the head teachers of the second classroom and fourth classroom to the academic affairs office. Wang Qingqi told them that Chu Peihan had slapped Gu Xiaoxiao, and something terrible had happened to Gu Ning. He also told them to read the posts about Gu Ning on the forum. When Zhang Qiuhua read through the posts, she had the same reaction as everyone else. She was first shocked by Gu Ning's extraordinary ability, then scared by the Qing gang, and annoyed by Gu Xiaoxiao's involvement at the end. She was also curious about what Gu Ning had done to Gu Xiaoxiao that made her be so cruel to Gu Ning, but she could only run to the academic affairs office to find the truth. Gu Xiaoxiao's cheeks were still red and swollen. Luckily, she would be fine soon with ointment. Although she was injured, she couldn't leave right away, because she needed to face what she had done. Later, they went to the academic affairs office. The leader of the academic affairs office was a 50-year-old man named Zhu Jian. He was upright to some extent. He would yield to power and protected himself, but if the power was absent, he would be fair. It was understandable, actually. Of course, he wouldn't hurt people on his own initiative either. He was going to adjudicate in this mess. Wang Qingqi arrived at the academic affairs office with Gu Ning and others. Zhu Jian glanced at Chu Peihan and Gu Xiaoxiao, who had red swollen cheeks. He immediately knew that it must have been Chu Peihan who had slapped Gu Xiaoxiao and had been caught by Wang Qingqi. Zhu Jian was helpless now because he could do nothing about Chu Peihan. In this school, he was one of the few people who were aware of Chu Peihan's powerful background. She had the gang to support her, which was the reason why she could still stay in the school even after she had been punished countless times. Chu Peihan, couldn't you be quiet for a little while? Zhu Jian criticized, but while still being gentle. Sir, not this time. Gu Xiaoxiao deserves it. Chu Peihan argued with anger. She wasn't afraid of Zhu Jian, but she showed her respect. You? Zhu Jian was annoyed. Chu Peihan used the same excuse every time she punched other students. He knew Chu Peihan liked to make a big fuss over a minor issue. Wang Qingqi was a little embarrassed. He said, "Please read those posts and watch the videos on our school forum first." Wang Qingqi didn't know how to explain it himself. It was so humiliating. Thus he directly advised Zhu Jian to read and watch the posts and videos. Zhu Jian knew that there was the hottest news on their school forum, so he immediately checked it. Title: Almighty Goddess Gu beats down 5 men within minutes. Video. Title. A female student beats down 5 men from the Qing gang. Video. Title. The man alleges Gu Xiaoxiao is behind this. Video. Title. A fierce fight outside our school, the leading man betrays. Video. Reading the headlines, Zhu Jian was so mad that he almost couldn't breathe normally. His cold sight fell on Gu Xiaoxiao. Gu Xiaoxiao was trembling in fear. So was Wang Qingqi. Only Gu Ning and Chu Peihan weren't affected. If what had happened was true, Gu Xiaoxiao would be in big trouble. To figure out what exactly had happened, Zhu Jian clicked the videos open to watch them according to the timeline. He was shocked to see that Gu Ning, a girl alone, beat down 5 grown-up men. Before Zhu Jian could finish all the videos, the head teachers of the 2nd and 4th classrooms were already there. But they didn't interrupt Zhu Jian. The head teacher of the 2nd classroom was a man in his early 30s. His name was Zhang Yuan. He had no idea about the videos, so didn't know the details. He only knew that Chu Peihan had slapped Gu Xiaoxiao. However, Zhang Yuan didn't know what to do with Chu Peihan's hobby of fighting with other students either. Chu Peihan wouldn't change unless she wanted to. Other than the principal and Zhu Jian, Zhang Yuan also knew about Chu Peihan's background in their school. The principal had told Zhang Yuan not to annoy Chu Peihan, and to ignore all her repeated absences from classes. Although Zhang Yuan was unhappy in the beginning, especially because Chu Peihan loved to be late and absent, he got to know her character gradually. Chu Peihan was the kind of student who wouldn't get in fights unless others irritated her. In addition, Chu Peihan was always one of the top 50 in her grade, and one of the top 10 in her class. Therefore, Zhang Yuan didn't have much prejudice towards her. But he still had no idea how to handle such a troublesome student. After Zhang Yuan arrived, he glared at Chu Peihan. The latter shrugged like she didn't care about it at all. Zhang Qiuhua knew some of the details. She looked to Gu Ning with doubts. Gu Ning immediately wore an innocent face. Zhang Qiuhua basically believed that it wasn't Gu Ning's fault. While Zhu Jian was watching the video in which Lin Yuehao betrayed Gu Xiaoxiao, he was more than annoyed. Zhang Yuan also heard the talk from the video. Now he finally understood what had happened, and rounded his eyes in shock. If it was true, Gu Xiaoxiao was such an evil person. Zhang Yuan was aware that Chu Peihan and Gu Ning were close. Accordingly, Chu Peihan must have beaten Gu Xiaoxiao for Gu Ning. He was now reluctant to blame Chu Peihan. Although she shouldn't have beaten Gu Xiaoxiao, what Gu Xiaoxiao had done was too immoral and illegal even. Zhu Jian hit the table with his hand loudly all of a sudden. Everyone was surprised. Gu Xiaoxiao, is what that man said true? Zhu Jian glared at Gu Xiaoxiao, questioning her with seriousness. No, it's not. It's not true. Gu Xiaoxiao was horrified now, but still refused to admit it, but she was too young to lie well. Gu Xiaoxiao, don't think you'll be fine just by denying it. The man is our witness, Chu Peihan mocked. Gu Xiaoxiao panicked and didn't know what to say. Tell me, why did you do it? Zhu Jian questioned. Gu Xiaoxiao lowered her head, remaining quiet. Since Gu Xiaoxiao refused to tell the truth, Zhu Jian could only turn to the victim. He asked, "Who is this goddess Gu?" Hearing that, Gu Ning felt a little embarrassed. She walked ahead. "It's me. I'm Gu Ning from the 4th classroom in the 12th grade." Zhu Jian was astonished to know that.
Gu Ning.
Are you the Gu Ning who is the top one in this monthly test? Yes, Gu Ning answered. Gu Ning was suddenly famous these days. As the leader of the Academic Affairs Office, Zhu Jian had naturally heard of her. However, it wasn't the right time to talk about that now. Zhu Jian then asked, "Gu Ning, do you have a grudge with Gu Xiaoxiao? Like the man said, I've slapped Gu Xiaoxia, but I did it for a reason." Gu Xiaoxiao has humiliated me and my mother continuously. It's an open secret now. All the students in the first, second, third, and fourth classrooms know about it, Gu Ning explained with honesty. Since Gu Ning said so, Zhu Jian was likely to believe her. Gu Xiaoxiao had humiliated Gu Ning and Gu Ning's mother first, so it wasn't a big deal that Gu Ning had slapped Gu Xiaoxiao. However, if Gu Xiaoxiao turned to the Qing gang for help to ruin Gu Ning just because of that, Gu Xiaoxiao was the one to blame. How do you know that the man was telling the truth? Zhu Jian asked Gu Ning. He wasn't protecting Gu Xiaoxiao, but he wanted to have solid proof. Because the man who betrayed Gu Xiaoxiao is her cousin. If it doesn't prove anything, I can only turn to the police for help, Gu Ning replied. No. The minute Gu Xiaoxiao heard the words the police, she got nervous. Now there was no need to argue any further. Gu Xiaoxiao's reaction explained everything. If she hadn't done it, she wouldn't be so terrified to see the police. However, Gu Xiaoxiao still refused to admit or apologize. She threatened instead. Gu Ning, if you dare to call the police, my dad will never let you get away with it. Enough! Zhu Jian shouted at her in anger. Gu Xiaoxiao, you haven't shown any sign of regret after you've done such a horrible thing. Now you even threaten the victim. How shameless are you? Not only Zhu Jian, but the other three teachers also felt greatly disappointed and angry at Gu Xiaoxiao's behavior. Gu Xiaoxiao was very academic. She was one of the top 40 in her grade, and was very likely to get into a prestigious school. She could be an honor of her high school, but her character was so terrible. Professor Wang, please call Gu Xiaoxiao's parents and tell them to take her back home. Our school can't allow her to study here any longer, Zhu Jian ordered. He was going to expel Gu Xiaoxiao. No, please, Gu Xiaoxiao was considerably anxious. She wanted to say something but didn't know what to say. She wasn't willing to admit what she had done. Yes, sir. Wang Qingqi didn't dare to disobey Zhu Jian's order. He also didn't want to protect a criminal against his principles. Besides, if Gu Ning called the police, Gu Xiaoxiao could end up in jail or have a criminal history. The school's reputation would be affected if she stayed. Gu Ning, say something for me. Aren't you fine now? Gu Xiaoxiao yelled at Gu Ning. She still had no intention to apologize. Before Gu Ning said a word, Chu Peihan was mad. Gu Xiaoxiao, you're indeed shameless. Ning Ning is fine only because she isn't weak. If she hadn't successfully beaten down those hoodlums, she would have been ruined. Shut your mouth now. Otherwise I'll punch you silent. Chu Peihan threatened Gu Xiaoxiao, but none of the teachers stopped her. 'Cause Chu Peihan was right. If Gu Ning hadn't successfully beaten down those hoodlums, she would have been ruined already. Gu Xiaoxiao had to take the responsibility. Gu Xiaoxiao, I didn't call the police and send you to jail. That's the best I can do. You should be thankful that you're from the Gu family. I'll save your face only for the sake of my mother. Besides, your behavior affects our school's reputation badly. It's impossible for you to stay, Gu Ning said. She believed that she had shown her mercy already. You? Gu Xiaoxiao couldn't retort, although she still refused to face it. Outside, Wang Qingqi called Gu Qinxiang. Gu Qinxiang saw that it was Wang Qingqi's call. He unconsciously thought that Xiaoxiao probably made some mistakes. Hi, Professor Wang. Gu Qinxiang immediately answered the call. Hi, Mr. Gu. The thing is, your daughter Gu Xiaoxiao had a conflict with one of our students. She turned to the Qing gang for help to ruin that female student. Although the female student survived, we have decided to expel Gu Xiaoxiao. Please come to the school as soon as possible, Wang Qingqi said. What? Knowing that, Gu Qinxiang was totally struck dumb. It was so unbelievable. He understood that Gu Xiaoxiao had been naughty since she had been a little girl, But he never expected that she would do illegal things. She even turned to the Qing gang this time. Gu Qinxiang immediately went to the school. He didn't have time to ask who the student Gu Xiaoxiao had planned to ruin was. After that, except for Wang Qingqi and Gu Xiaoxiao, the rest all left. Gu Ning, I think that it's not enough that Gu Xiaoxiao only leaves the school, Chu Peihan said with disappointment. She didn't care about Zhang Yuan and Zhang Qiuhua, who were walking ahead of her at all. Don't worry, if she continues to behave like that, she'll ruin herself one day in the future, Gu Ning said plainly. Zhang Yuan and Zhang Qiuhua only turned around and gave them a glance, but didn't say a word. They were right after all. Gu Ning, who was the victim, didn't get any compensation nor apologies. It was understandable that Chu Peihan felt angry for her. If the victim had been Chu Peihan, the thing wouldn't end so easily. Gu Ning's words also made sense. If Gu Xiaoxiao's character remained the same, she would ruin herself one day. When Zhang Yuan and Zhang Qiuhua turned their heads back, Gu Ning pulled out her phone. She opened WeChat, typing down lines of words. Gu Ning showed them to Chu Peihan first, then sent them into the WeChat group. Gu Ning. Spread the news that Gu Xiaoxiao turned to gangsters for help to rape a female student to every high school in our city. Force Gu Xiaoxiao to leave City F. However, don't say that the female student is me. Chu Peihan was cheered up a little. It was a piece of cake for them to spread the news. Although Hao Ran and others were in the middle of class, except for Mu Ku and Yu Mixi, they all played on their phones during the classes. Thus they read the message at once. They were also happy to hear that Gu Xiaoxiao was expelled. When Gu Ning was back in her classroom, she noticed that Xiao Feifei was gloating. Gu Ning was confused. She wasn't the one who was in trouble now. Why was Xiao Feifei gloating? Apparently, Gu Ning didn't think the Qing gang would revenge itself on her. In addition, Gu Ning had Chu Peihan to protect her. The Qing gang would certainly not revenge itself on Gu Ning. Before long, Gu Qinxiang arrived at the school. He didn't tell Lin Lijuan but went to the school alone. Gu Xiaoxiao and Wang Qingqi were waiting for Gu Qinxiang in the academic affairs office. Gu Qinxiang had a quick temper. He was so mad at Gu Xiaoxiao's behavior, so he slapped Gu Xiaoxiao directly the minute he arrived without asking for the reason. Gu Xiaoxiao's red swollen cheeks were hurt once more. It was too painful for her to say a word. She was annoyed that Gu Qinxiang had slapped her, but she didn't dare to fight back, so she blamed Gu Ning for all of this. She thought that it was all Gu Ning's fault. Gu Ning was fine now. Why couldn't she forgive her? Gu Xiaoxiao was indeed rotten to the bone. It was her fault, but now she blamed Gu Ning for it. Gu Xiaoxiao, how dare you to do that? Gu Qinxiang raised his voice in anger. Compared with the fact that Gu Xiaoxiao had planned to ruin a female student, Gu Qinxiang was more annoyed that Gu Xiaoxiao had a connection with the Qing gang. He was worried that that connection would affect the Gu family. After that, Gu Qinxiang looked to Zhu Jian. He apologized. I'm so sorry for what my daughter has done. It's my fault. I failed to teach her well as her parent. I'll take her away right now. The school had made the decision. Gu Qinxiang felt too ashamed to beg Zhu Jian to let Gu Xiaoxiao stay. But he was also curious about the reason why Gu Xiaoxiao wanted to ruin that female student. Thus he asked, "May I know what conflict my daughter has had with that student?" Gu Xiaoxiao has humiliated the student named Gu Ning and her mother, so Gu Ning slapped Gu Xiaoxiao, Zhu Jian said.
Gu Ning.
Hearing that, Gu Qinxiang wore a displeased face with the mixed emotions. However, he couldn't blame Gu Ning now. He disliked Gu Ning, but he only treated her like she was an outsider. He wanted to maintain a distance away from her, but he never had the thought to hurt them. Gu Qinxiang left with Gu Xiaoxiao later. They didn't even take the books in the classroom with them. On the way, Gu Qinxiang discovered Gu Xiaoxiao's cheeks were red and swollen. He felt regretful. Although he had slapped Gu Xiaoxiao in anger just then, he wouldn't allow others to slap his daughter. Who caused the injuries on your face? Gu Qinxiang asked in a low voice. Gu Ning's friend, Gu Xiaoxiao said. Thinking of Chu Peihan, Gu Xiaoxiao was in a rage, but she could do nothing about it. It was obvious that Gu Ning's friend had slapped Gu Xiaoxiao for Gu Ning, but why was it Chu Peihan? Gu Qinxiang asked. What's her background? It seemed like he planned to fight back for Gu Xiaoxiao. I don't know clearly. Her family seems powerful. She is absent from classes and fights all day, but the principal and teachers don't dare to expel her, Gu Xiaoxiao replied. That was the reason that Gu Xiaoxiao was scared of Chu Peihan. Gu Qinxiang was speechless. So he could do nothing. Gu Qinxiang was the kind of person who yielded to power and took advantage of the weak. Since the principal and teacher's hands were tied, he himself could only give up. A girl with a powerful background. Her family name was Chu. Gu Qinxiang thought a while, but he failed to think of any powerful family with the family name of Chu in City F. However, he also knew that there were many invisible powerful families in this city. It wasn't strange that he didn't know. Since the principal and teachers didn't know how to deal with Chu Peihan, she must be an important figure. Gu Qinggang could only change the topic. How did you get to know the Qinggang? I don't. It's my cousin Lin Yuehao. I told him to teach Gu Ning a lesson, Gu Xiaoxiao replied. She didn't feel guilty at all when she said that. Lin Yuehao? Haven't I warned you not to keep in touch with him? He'll harm your life sooner or later. Speaking of Lin Yuehao, Gu Qinxiang was annoyed. Lin Yuehao was merely a hoodlum who fooled around all day. If his family hadn't had many properties, he would have spoiled all the wealth his family had. But it would happen in the near future anyway. Because of Lin Yuehao, Gu Qinxiang didn't allow Lin Lijuan to contact the Lin family often. He didn't want to be involved in trouble caused by Lin Yuehao. Alright, you must stay obedient from now on. If it happens again, I won't take care of you. I'll send you to the number 1 or number 2 high school in City F later. The damage had been done, so Gu Qinxiang didn't want to criticize Gu Xiaoxiao for much longer.
Fine, Gu Xiaoxiao answered.
Wang Qingqi went back to his class and told his students that Gu Xiaoxiao had been expelled. No one was surprised to hear that, because what Gu Xiaoxiao had done was even worse than an affray. Qin Zheng had mixed emotions. He felt sorry for Gu Xiaoxiao, but he wasn't very sad. Probably because he didn't like Gu Xiaoxiao that much. He was only interested in her background. Meanwhile, he found himself with a growing affection towards Gu Ning. It would be better for him if Gu Xiaoxiao left. When Gu Qinxiang brought Gu Xiaoxiao home, Lin Lijuan and the old lady were both shocked by her face. They asked whether it was because of Gu Ning again, but before Gu Xiaoxiao could answer, Lin Lijuan swore at Gu Ning at once, so did the old lady. They believed that only Gu Ning dared to slap Gu Xiaoxiao till now. Enough. Close your mouth. Gu Qinxiang was displeased again to hear them arguing and swearing. He lost his patience and criticized, It's not Gu Ning. Let Xiaoxiao rest first. What? It's not Gu Ning? Then who did it? Lin Lijuan was greatly surprised. Gu Qinxiang told Lin Lijuan and the old lady everything. The two stayed quiet after that. They were truly astonished by Gu Xiaoxiao's behavior. After a while, Lin Lijuan said, Nevertheless, Gu Ning is fine now. Why does Xiaoxiao have to be expelled? She is a senior student, and it's very inappropriate to transfer right now. Shut your mouth. Xiaoxiao disobeyed the law. If Gu Ning had called the police, Xiaoxiao would have been put in jail. She's 18 already. Gu Qinxiang criticized. If not so, Gu Qinxiang wouldn't compromise. Hearing that, Lin Lijuan immediately shut her mouth. Gu Qinxiang didn't stay in his home for long. He went back to his company without delay. It was 10 a.m. already. Lin Lijuan wanted Gu Qinxiang to eat at home before he went back to his company, but Gu Qinxiang rejected. Gu Qinxiang always left early and came back late. Lin Lijuan felt aggrieved in her heart. They had to wait for a long time to have a meal together. Even their sexual life had to wait as well. In the beginning, Lin Lijuan had the doubt that Gu Qinxiang had a mistress, so he wasn't sexually active with her. She had investigated him several times, but failed to find any clues. She gave up the idea at the end. When Gu Qinxiang got back to his company, his female secretary immediately brought a cup of tea to his office. She was 25 years old, named Lu Yue. Although she was wearing large glasses, it wasn't hard to notice her beautiful features. Her tight suit skirt accentuated her charming figure. It was completely the allure of uniform. "Chairman Gu, here is your tea." Lu Yue handed the tea to Gu Qinxiang with respect, but she looked at Gu Qinxiang in a different way. Their relationship wasn't simple. Gu Qinxiang also stared at Lu Yue in a special way, especially when his sight fell on her ample bosom. His Adam's apple moved unconsciously. He was sexually excited all of a sudden. Apparently, they were having an affair. Exactly, Lu Yue was Gu Qinxiang's mistress, and she wasn't the first one. Gu Qinxiang was tired of Lin Lijuan a long time ago. Although she took good care of herself, she was hardly comparable with young girls. However, no matter how tired he was of Lin Lijuan, or how many mistresses he had, he wouldn't divorce her. First was because of their children, and the second was because he was too old to have a scandal. Besides, it was exciting to have an affair. He could also change his mistress as he liked. Lu Yue knew Gu Qinxiang wouldn't divorce and marry her, but that was exactly what she wanted. She was young, and wasn't willing to marry an old man just for money. Gu Qinxiang was almost 50. He was losing his sexual power. If she married him, she could end up in a boring marriage without satisfactory sex. And if she wanted to have a lover behind his back, he would be irritated when he found out. Therefore, she only planned to get as much money as possible from Gu Qinxiang while he was interested in her. If she got bored, she could go find another man. When Gu Qinxiang took the cup of tea from Lu Yue, he deliberately touched her hand and said, "Miss Lu, come have a meal with me tonight." "Sure," Lu Yue answered. She ogled Gu Qinxiang before turning back and walking away. She certainly knew what the meal was like. It was a private meeting only between them. That afternoon, Gu Ning gathered her friends to have the lunch together. It was on an E. An E and Hao Ran were friends already and got along very well with each other. "An E, I heard your family's company has been bought, but your father is still the chairman," Hao Ran said with care. "Yes, but my father didn't tell me the details. Anyway, Shanghua survived and my father remained in his position. I don't care if my father earns less money. I just want us to live a peaceful life," An Yi said. He didn't care who the owner of Shanghua was now. He felt satisfied with his life. Although he had no idea who the owner was, he was thankful to the person in his heart. An Yi valued family above money, which impressed Gu Ning. "Well, Gu Ning, can I join your group? I want to learn Kung Fu too." An Yi looked to Gu Ning. He was a little shy but full of anticipation. "No problem." Gu Ning didn't refuse, because she had the intention to let An Yi be the successor to An Guangyao's job, so it was necessary to train him earlier. Of course, it all depended on An Yi himself. If he wasn't willing to do so, Gu Ning wouldn't force him. For An Guangyao's sake, Gu Ning said yes. Since An Yi was now a part of them, he joined their WeChat group too. Gu Ning didn't attend the evening class, so their training time was set in the afternoon. After lunch, they went to the woods together. On the way, they coincidentally met those boys who had beaten an E the other day. The minute they saw an E, Gu Ning and the others, they turned around, escaping away. Hao Ran and the others couldn't help laughing out loud. Those boys had learned their lesson. "Oh boss, my uncle's 60th birthday is the day after tomorrow. My cousin Yifan invited you all to come have fun," Qin Zixuan said. Yes, it was Qin Yifan who invited them. Qin Zixuan wasn't qualified enough to invite people to attend his uncle's birthday. Actually, Qin Yifan wanted to invite them himself to show his sincerity, but he was worried it would be too abrupt, so he let Qin Zixuan do it. He couldn't only invite Gu Ning, which would be embarrassing. Thus he invited all of them. "I don't think that's a good idea," Gu Ning declined. She wasn't close with Qin Yifan after all, but to be honest, Gu Ning really wanted to attend the birthday party. The Qin family was the second-tier super-rich family. There would be many celebrities and important businessmen at the birthday party. It was the best place to build her network. In addition, most of the guests went to the party for networking. Although she was young, and probably no one would chat with her, her presence was meaningful. "Don't worry. Hao Ran and Tianping will go too. We've sent invitation letters to Muku and Yi's family already. And now let me and my older brother invite you 3 girls to come. Just come and have fun with us," Qin Zixuan persuaded. "Come on, boss. Come with us. Mixi and Peihan, you both must come too," Hao Ran added. "Ningning, I want to go to the party. Just come along with us." Chu Peihan grasped Gu Ning's arm. Chu Peihan would never miss a party. As for you Mixi, if Gu Ning went to the party, she would go with her. "All right. Then let's go together," Gu Ning answered. Nevertheless, she couldn't go with empty hands. What kind of gift should she send? Chu Peihan pulled Gu Ning and Yu Mixi away using the excuse that they needed to go to the washroom. "What kind of gift should we send?" Chu Peihan asked. She completely had no idea about gifts. Most importantly, the host was an important figure, so the gift had to be special, but they were merely students. They couldn't afford expensive gifts. Gu Ning knew that Master Qin liked jade. Ordinary jade wasn't suitable to be used as a gift, but she wasn't willing to send him a high-level one. And it wasn't appropriate for her to be so high-profile. She was a student after all. It was very tricky. After a while, Gu Ning thought of those antiques that she had bought in City G. Since she couldn't send expensive gifts, Shen Wansan's teapot and Wu Guanzhong's painting weren't the options. She then only had the glass with deer heads from the Qianlong period. Thus Gu Ning decided to send Master Qin the glass. It was worth around 2 million yuan, which was a lot for her as a student. "Oh, I have a suitable gift. We can send it under all our names," Gu Ning said. She didn't mind sharing the gift with her friends at all. "Please don't do that," Yu Mixi said. "Why not? We're students. It won't be appropriate if we send a gift that is too expensive. Mine is the best choice. It's not very expensive but rare," Gu Ning explained. "Tell us. What is it?" Knowing that, Chu Peihan and Yu Mixi were curious. "It's a secret for now," Gu Ning said. "Please just tell us." Chu Peihan was impatient with curiosity. Gu Ning wouldn't tell them no matter how much they asked. Chu Peihan had to give up in the end. The news that Gu Xiaoxiao had been expelled went abroad in the afternoon, but no one felt sorry for her. Even Chen Xiao, who was Gu Xiaoxiao's best friend, denied her close connection with Gu Xiaoxiao. When others came to her and asked her whether she had been aware of Gu Xiaoxiao's scheme, she denied it. She said that she and Gu Xiaoxiao only seemed close, but they didn't get along well. Gu Xiaoxiao never told her anything private. Chen Xiao also claimed that she was disappointed at Gu Xiaoxiao's behavior. Actually, Chen Xiao was only disappointed that Gu Xiaoxiao had failed. Many students knew that Chen Xiao hated Gu Ning, so they barely believed her words. Besides, most of the students secretly kept a distance away from Chen Xiao. They were worried that she would do the same thing as Gu Xiaoxiao. Chen Xiao knew the reason why she was alienated. She was mad, but she blamed Gu Xiaoxiao for it. What had happened to Gu Xiaoxiao made Xiao Feifei feel worried. Luckily Gu Ning didn't have proof. Otherwise she could be expelled too. However, what she didn't know was that Gu Ning didn't deal with her, only because she wasn't a threat in Gu Ning's eyes. And the grudges between Gu Xiaoxiao and Gu Ning had existed for a long time. In the afternoon, Guangyao called Gu Ning. He told her that the Qin family invited him to attend Master Qin's 60th birthday party. Gu Ning told him that she would be coming as well. Her schoolmate had invited her. "Oh, Uncle, and what do you plan to send?" Gu Ning asked. "I just received the invitation letter today, so I don't have an idea yet. Do you have any suggestions?" Guangyao replied. It was difficult for everyone to send a gift. The Qin family was a super-rich family. It lacked nothing, so the gift couldn't be too ordinary, but it was hard to find rare objects. Besides, it needed to be reasonably rare. If it wasn't rare enough, it failed to show the sender's respect. If it was too rare, it might be seen as over-fawning. It was an agonizing decision. Gu Ning thought for a while before she said, "I have an object. You can take it." "What is it?" Guangyao asked with curiosity. "It's Wu Guanzhong's landscape painting. The pond and the people," Gu Ning said. "What? Wu Guanzhong's landscape painting? The pond and the people?" Guangyao was shocked. Guangyao had no interest in antiques or paintings, but he had heard of Wu Guanzhong, who was a famous artist. He had read a piece of news that one of Wu Guanzhong's oil paintings had been sold at the price of 5 million yuan at auction. Although not each of his paintings was expensive, it wouldn't be cheap since it was Wu Guanzhong's. "Boss, I think that's too priceless to be a gift. Other people will think that we want to ride on the Qin family's coattails," Guangyao said. He didn't think it was a good idea. "It'll be fine. You can explain to others that this was bought accidentally by the real boss of Shanghua at the price of 1,000 yuan. In that case, the gift won't be too rare or too expensive. At the same time, people will also understand that the real boss of Shanghua isn't an ordinary person," Gu Ning said. "Accidentally bought it?" Guangyao asked. "Boss, is it true that you accidentally bought it?" Somehow, Guangyao believed that Gu Ning must have accidentally bought the painting. He got excited. "Yes, I accidentally bought it at the antique market in City G last weekend," Gu Ning said. Hearing that, Guangyao rounded his eyes, then took a long breath in. Jesus, his boss was so unbelievably lucky. However, how could she know that it was real? Guangyao was growingly interested in Gu Ning now. She was becoming more and more mysterious in his eyes. Gu Ning added, "I'll give it to you tomorrow afternoon." "Great," Guangyao replied. He hung up later. He didn't think that it was inappropriate to take the object from Gu Ning, because he represented Shanghua real estate while Gu Ning was the real boss. On the way home, Gu Ning met Su Jinshan and Leng Xiaoting when she passed by Zone C that afternoon. They were walking out of Zone C. Seeing Leng Xiaoting, Gu Ning thought of his face of sheer panic. There was a meaningful smile on her lips. Leng Xiaoting was uneasy to meet her. He deliberately turned his head away. "Hey, have you finished your classes?" Su Jinshan greeted her with friendliness. "Yes, have you eaten?" Gu Ning asked. "We're going to eat right now." "Oh, we haven't dined together since we met. We're leaving tomorrow. And I have no idea when we'll meet the next time. Why don't you join us today? My treat."
Su Jinshan invite.
He really wanted to become friends with Gu Ning. Leng Xiaoting was displeased to see Su Jinshan being so friendly to Gu Ning, but he didn't stop him. Probably because he wanted to dine with Guning too. He didn't even know it himself. Sure, Guning answered quickly. She glanced at Lung shouting at the same time. Obviously, Guning answered for the sake of Lung shouting. Su Jinshan missed that detail. He was only happy to receive an affirmative answer. What do you want to have? He asked. Seafood. Guning replied without hesitation. Hearing that, both Su Jinshan and Lung shouting frowned. Seeing that, Guning was puzzled. What's wrong? Shouting is allergic to seafood, Su Jinshan explained. Guning was surprised. Lung shouting had an allergy to seafood? Now she understood why he hadn't eaten anything yesterday. It's okay. I can have something else, Lung shouting said airily. He was doing this for the good of Guning. Well, I don't want to have seafood now, Guning said. There is a popular restaurant on the Yui Road. Let's go there. Lung shouting took a glance at Guning. There was something unknown in his eyes. Guning smiled at him. His heart lost a beat. Lung shouting immediately moved his sight away from her. Guning felt like laughing. Lung shouting was so shy and funny. After that, Guning called and told her mother that she was going to eat with her friends. Guman agreed. Guman always dined with Guqing and her family. She was never alone now. On the way, Su Jinshan kept talking with Guning. Lung shouting was displeased. He was eager to separate them, but it was only his thought, he didn't actually do it. Guning, you're going to have the National College entrance exam soon. Which university is your aim? Su Jinshan asked. The Capital University, Guning said. The Capital University? Wow, you must be very academic. It's good news though. My family lives in the capital. If you need any help in the future, feel free to turn to me. Although I'm not all-purpose, I'm good at solving problems. May we exchange our numbers? Su Jinshan asked. He was nervous to ask that question. Hearing that, Lung shouting was more displeased. He said unconsciously, he is busy. You can turn to me. Lung shouting tried to stop Su Jinshan from getting near Guning. What? You're the one who is much busier than us.
Su Jinshan adger.
Indeed, compared with the others, Lung shouting was always occupied by work throughout the whole year. He stayed in the army no matter if he had tasks or not. All of a sudden, Su Jinshan thought of something more important. Wait a moment. Since when have you become so friendly to others? Lung shouting gave Su Jinshan a cold look. Su Jinshan shut his mouth at once, but he stared at Lung shouting back. He wasn't wrong after all. Actually, Lung shouting was asking himself the same question too. Since when had he become so friendly to others? However, hadn't he always been kind? His job, and the tasks he had fulfilled were all aimed at punishing evil people as well as bringing peace to this country. Is he always cold? Guning asked Su Jinshan but looked to Lung shouting. Not really. He is active in work, but I've never seen him being proactive to help others with personal affairs. Su Jinshan was telling the truth. Lung shouting was indeed active in fulfilling his tasks, or dealing with crime, but if someone turned to him for help concerning personal affairs, he would give them the cold shoulder. Oh, in that case it seems I'm different.
Kuning peamet.
She gave Lung shouting a meaningful look. He felt nervous, but he had to admit that Guning was different to him. Meanwhile, Guning couldn't help feeling happy in her heart. She wasn't clear why she was so happy to hear that, but she just enjoyed it. Exactly. Otherwise I wouldn't think that you too are, Su Jinshan said. Enough. If you keep talking without an end, I'll let you be busier as of this year. Lung shouting interrupted Su Jinshan before he could finish. It was an obvious threat. Hearing that, Su Jinshan shut his mouth again. He wanted to complain but didn't dare to say a word. Lung shouting was the boss. It was totally up to him whether Su Jinshan would be busy. From Su Jinshan's experience, he knew the harder he resisted, the worse the situation would be. Su Jinshan couldn't argue with Leng's shouting. He could only approach Gu Ning, complaining in a low voice, "Be careful. He's so easily annoyed, and is used to exploiting us." Although Su Jinshan kept his voice low, Leng's shouting still heard him clearly. He was displeased that Su Jinshan complained about him to Gu Ning, and the two stood so close now. Leng's shouting was dissatisfied. He threatened, "If you want to, I can make your allegation the truth." It was a threat from Su Jinshan's perspective, but Gu Ning thought it was an explanation. Su Jinshan now completely shut his mouth in fear. His boss was a doer, not a talker. He didn't want to challenge Leng's shouting at all. Su Jinshan worked for Leng's shouting. Gu Ning was slightly surprised. In that case, Su Jinshan was a military officer too. Seeing as Leng's shouting denied Su Jinshan's complaint, then who was telling the truth? Gu Ning thought that Su Jinshan was probably right, because Leng's shouting did force him to close his mouth by threatening him, but Gu Ning stayed quiet. Before long they arrived at the restaurant, walking into a private room. "Here, help yourself please." Su Jinshan gave the menu to Gu Ning. Gu Ning took it without hesitation. She ordered 2 dishes that she liked, then gave the menu back to Su Jinshan and Leng shouting. Gu Ning and Su Jinshan exchanged their numbers too. Su Jinshan had said that he was able to deal with many problems. Thus Gu Ning assumed that he had a powerful background. Gu Ning wasn't dumb enough to reject such a good opportunity. Meanwhile, Gu Ning thought to herself that she was so lucky in this incarnation to meet so many kind people. She of course had also met many bad people along the way. Leng shouting wasn't willing to see the two being so close, but he didn't stop them. He wasn't in an appropriate position to stop them, and there was no need to do so. They all lived in Fenghua Luxury Mansion, so they walked back together after the meal. Su Jinshan and Leng shouting walked Gu Ning to Zone G before they went back home. Gu Ning sent Leng shouting a message when she was home. Leng shouting stayed awake all night because of it. Gu Ning, my handsome military officer, please take care of yourself while you're fulfilling your tasks. You're the best. XOXO. Actually, Gu Ning was just having fun. She found that Leng shouting was very shy and introverted, though he was always cold. Therefore, she felt like flirting with him. Leng shouting knew that Gu Ning did it on purpose, but he couldn't stop himself from thinking of her. It was around 8 p.m. at that time. In a bedroom, there were endless moans of sexual pleasure, and man and a woman were having fierce sex on a big white bed. The man was Gu Qinxiang, while the woman was Lu Yue. Lu Yue was much prettier without the glasses, especially her eyes. She could easily distract a man with her alluring eyes. In fact, she wore a pair of big glasses to disguise herself. She didn't want to attract too much attention, especially the suspicion from Lin Lijuan, because of her charming appearance. After half an hour of wild lovemaking, the two finally stopped. Lu Yue cleaned herself up and lay on Gu Qinxiang's chest. "Boss, do you feel better now?" Lu Yue knew that Gu Qinxiang was in a bad mood, but she didn't know the reason. She wouldn't ask because she understood when she should stay quiet. That was her way to keep Gu Qinxiang being interested in her. "Yeah, much better. Baby, you're the only one who can make me happy." Gu Qinxiang kissed Lu Yue deeply. Lu Yue was skillful in bed. Gu Qinxiang was aware Lu Yue had had many lovers, but he didn't care. As long as Lu Yue didn't carry diseases and was able to make him sexually happy, he was satisfied. It was just a game after all. After the sexual excitement, Gu Qinxiang felt tired. It wasn't early, and he should go back home now in case someone found them. Gu Qinxiang had a short break before taking a bath. He cleaned himself up, and even drank as well as sprayed some wine around his body. He made it seem like he had just left from a social meeting. Those were Gu Qinxiang.